2020 for me has been about meeting my artful self again that I lost when I was 21, that I just completely shut down, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that when you said feels like flying, immediately my whole body said conversation. That's what feels like flying to me.
Yeah, totally.
Like, oh, like I know, conversation. Oh, and it's like, wait, not records? It's like, no, conversation. You know, those sort of almost transcendent, giddy moments. I've had great shows too. But yeah, 2020 is a lot of it is about sort of making friends again with that part of my life that I lost.
We need more perambulation.
And we are live. What an opener. We need more perambulation. I was just explaining to John that in Ireland we don't call strollers, we call them prams, and it's short for perambulation or perambulator.
I am well versed in the use of the word pram, but I just learned perambulation or perambulator. Thanks for that. I don't know how much use.
And that's it.
I think people are running for notebooks right now to take notes. Clearly, this is going to be a knowledge drop episode where they're like, oh shit. All right, guys.
Well, take out your pen and write down. I refer to it as Jamais. It's a wine from the Rhone, but Rory, you're saying it's Jamet?
I would say Jamet. I would say it's a hard T. But I'm guessing.
I think you might be right. So we're going to correct myself.
I speak a little French.
Jamet, Syrah, Rhone Valley, also a great producer of Côte Rôtie wines. So if you're looking for something comforting for the upcoming winter season, I highly recommend this. And it pairs really well with mini kebab.
It was quite a treat. So we're here, Spider, John and I, at the gift shop, and Michael is remote, and Dylan, our producer, is remote. He's on screen too. And this is our second week with our high-tech remote rig for Michael, where we can see him and hear him and record him remotely at the same quality as though he was here. And it's been great. Michael, you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Nice.
It'd be funny if I wasn't. It's like, this is working great. Can you hear me? No. Yeah, this is working really well. It sounds like you're in the room. Mm-hmm. And I kind of love it. Different time zones. I go for a walk at night and then podcast time.
Different emotional zones.
Different emotional zone for sure. Mm-hmm.
How was everyone's day?
Not the best.
Yeah, not the best here either.
Not for any specific reason.
Yeah.
It's just low energy this end of year. Kind of, I'm hesitant to talk too much about it because I don't want to be a bummer, but just a little bummed I have to stay in LA this year. So it's kind of catching up to me. I'd be preparing to leave next week and going home to New York for some weather shift, some season shift. And I'm not going to get it this year because of COVID. And
honesty is a central pillar of this podcast. You don't get to avoid talking about it if you feel it.
I know. I don't want to start off that way, but it's catching up to me a little bit. So this week I'm just kind of low energy. I just got booked for an EP and I'm like, it's an artist I love. So that's going to get me through it for now. But
Michael and I were texting, maybe on one of the group threads or maybe one of our own threads, but it was, I said about the podcast, I said, I'll die on the hill of honesty. If that's how I go, I want to go that way. Fucking sharing too much. I'm good with that.
Shout out to Geoff Ellis who texted me today. Yo, does mixing feel like ass or what today? And I was like, dude, I just replied, big fat ass.
We had the same.
Did you have the same conversation?
Yeah, we did. Some version of it, yeah.
Earth energy. What did you say? Earth.
Limp dick energy. That was one of the phrases.
And I just said, go home.
Yeah.
Like, just go home.
Yeah.
Take time off. I mean, I told him I'm cutting it at the 18th, and I'm putting a hard cut on work this year because I'm not going home, and I don't want to work during that time. But right now, it just feels like a wind down, and for a lot of mixers that I know, it was we're a little bit. Some of us are pandemic proof. We work from home. So we've been just going in, distracting ourselves from all the downfalls of what it means to be on lockdown in a city by working, as we're all good at doing. And it's catching up a bit at the moment. So that my day was reflecting on that mostly.
I have a friend back in Ireland who's going through a very rough breakup, an old close friend, the first guy I played music with. I learned how to play Free Falling on my brother's acoustic guitar. And I don't remember how long after, but we were we started jamming in a garage. You know, me and him. He learned bass, and he's gone through a rough breakup. And we were just talking about, I hadn't, you know, with my friends in Ireland, there's some of them I speak to every couple of years. You know, we catch up on the phone, and the friendships just jump off like we never.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, they're old, deep friendships. But I was just sort of at pains he was doing a lot of beating himself up for mistakes that he'd made, you know, which is cool. We all do that in relationships, right? But I was at pains to point out to him that it's an exceptionally rough year. You know, one of the mechanics in his year was that he and his partner, who both work outside the home, were forced to work from home. So you've got 2 people and a kid in a house, and you know, high pressure jobs in different ways, and it's a lot. It's a lot of change, and it's a lot. Because of the nature of his work, it's very heady. It's very, very sort of online and offline processing with your brain, and you've got to account for that. You've got to account for what this year has done to people. And I was texting with or emailing with Ian Hallquist tonight, a composer friend and client of ours, and just about this year. But it's like at the end of it all, we're just super lucky. The people who are working, the people who are healthy, we're so lucky. But even then, you have to account for the fact that this year it's been a steady, slow boil for everyone.
You have to account for it, and you have to deal with it. You know, for instance, my physical therapist told me off basically about what I've been doing sort of in my work from home mode, which is like go into the laptop tunnel and try to do as much as you can.
Yes.
And I have this very bad habit of really going into the matrix and not understanding time while I'm in there, just sort of head down, nose to the grindstone sort of mode, and not taking breaks, not standing up. You know, you tell Siri enough times that you're not going to stand up when she suggests you do, she stops suggesting it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of anyway, she gave me strategies, and Michael, you're going to love this, because she was like, you know what you're going to do? You're going to put in the calendar when you're going to sit, when you're going to stand, when you're going to be on the sofa, when you're going to be moving around during the day, and it's not going to be up to your mood. I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
This woman's speaking my language.
Yeah.
What was it Sydney said at dinner the other night? I don't give a fuck about things I say. Was that, how did she phrase it? She was something like this discipline piece, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, it can go in the calendar, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Monday night we did art club. So that's like the monthly, sort of like the conversation, but with more designers. Well, only designers, but more people on the call. And what I asked everyone was, how was your year? What are some things that you're reflecting on that you're excited about, kind of working towards getting better at in the next year, and all of that? And that led to a conversation about scheduling and planning and how diligent people are with planning or not. And one of the things was exactly that. It was sort of the split between the people that hyper plan or the people that are like fuck plans altogether, and then a subset of people that hyper plan that often break plans.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of dove into the psychology around that. Like, well, clearly there was some intention that you set when you made a plan. So how come it didn't go with, how come you didn't go through with it? And that was something.
Did you have
so much project management?
Can I read something that I wrote today or this week?
Yeah.
Just on that.
A poem about planning?
Not
about compression?
A poem about being a fuck up. No, it, and let me preface this by saying that I don't think any of these ideas are new or mine. It's probably something I read or some version of something that I sort of took in. But the question was, is it possible that your lack of discipline is really just caused by a lack of clarity about your goal? Without a clear goal, it's not obvious why we should sacrifice in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, if you're not really signed on to the outcome,
you're subject
why
to
take pain now?
Rationalizations and stuff.
Yeah. Why would I do the hard thing now? It's like I'm not that clear on where we're headed. So, that was something I may or may not have been feeling in the moment. But,
no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm actually wondering from Michael's art club, how many people flipped sides on their perspective of being hyper planning or lack of planning, who met in the middle, like where did people wind up after they heard people give examples of what they do?
It was a pretty even spread of people. Some people were, I plan sometimes. I plan like the things that really matter, but otherwise I don't. Some people are like, I literally don't plan anything, which I don't actually believe. I think like there's some level of planning. Like you can't just, I mean, you could.
How far out do you plan? 10 minutes before? Or 10 days before? Yeah.
Right. Even a minute. But hey, I mean, I don't know. And it was interesting when you dove into those people a little bit more, where their problems were and what was happening, what was going on in their life and all of these other areas. And it was like, oh yeah, like clearly, to Rory's point, it's like, maybe you're just not ready to plan. Maybe something's preventing you from planning or even aspiring to plan. And it actually reminds me of this chart I just saw online. It's a chart that says managing complex change. And I guess I could share it somewhere, but basically it shows these 5 areas that kind of lead to change, which is vision, skills, incentives, resources, and an action plan. If that chain is aligned and you have all those things fulfilled, change can happen. But if one of those things are missing, different outputs would form. So if you're missing vision, right, it leads to confusion. So if you're like doing something and you're totally confused about why you're doing it, probably doesn't have a vision. It just reminded me of what Rory was getting at. They have anxiety around skills lacking. And I find that all the time. Anytime I'm like really anxious about a thing I'm doing, it's typically around, do I feel like I know enough about this? Like actually not know enough about the vision, but do I know enough to achieve this thing? Missing incentives leads to resistance. Lack of resources to frustration, and then a lack of action plan leading to false starts.
Are you reading my memoir?
Yeah. No, I mean, dude, it blew my mind. I mean, I literally texted this diagram to my therapist and we talked about it for a bit. It's quite interesting because if you map it backwards, where it's like, what emotion are you feeling? And then where does what attribute is lacking? I mean, I typically lean on the anxiety side of things of this chart. I'm not usually frustrated or confused, but anxious for sure, and sometimes false starts. And I think, not having the action plan or sometimes the skills for specific things, like definitely leads to that. I mean, and to the contrary,
go ahead, man.
Like self-learning, I have it on my calendar actually for Sundays to block most of the day out to learn new things that relate to the things that I plan on doing or am doing. And I feel so calm after those days. I feel super empowered and just way more calm.
Did you listen to today's Knowledge Project?
No, there's a new one?
Yeah, dude comes on. I only listened to the first 30 minutes. Dude comes on, he's like, I read things about things that have nothing to do with what I do. I'm reading a book about whales right now. How many people are reading books about whales right now? And I was like, that's hilarious. Like, so he spends these Sundays, your version of these, reading things that have nothing to do.
That's what this podcast is. If you read all of the things about mixing, the chances of coming across something new about mixing in the material that's out there is almost zero. Very rarely.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do.
It's only through parallels.
Drawing
that you get a new lens.
You
know, whenever I worked with an artist whose first language wasn't English, they had a sort of poetic sense that regular English speakers wouldn't have. Even in their everyday speech, there was a sort of poetry to it because the idioms were foreign to me and whatever. And it's sort of like only through this other lens can you look at these mundane or simple things like in a different way.
Yeah.
You have to go out of your category to see the parallels and metaphor and to bring, and that's sort of the nature of innovation is sort of synthesizing and there's sort of hybrid concepts.
That definition of genius that is connecting two areas that were previously unconnected or two ideas that were previously unconnected.
Yes. This we're sort of getting into deep water already, but this thing of action plans that Michael brought up, I was really struck this week. listening to an interview with this scientist called Lisa Feldman Barrett. She was on Tom Bilyeu. I don't know how to pronounce it. Bilyeu.
Yeah, one of those.
Bailu?
Bailu. I have no idea.
I
how to
love the
pronounce
third
it.
option.
It's all this.
Bailu,
Yeah, I know.
Baloo.
I feel like it's Bailu.
Sorry, keep going.
It could be.
There's that
man.
poetry Spider was talking
Someone
about.
knows.
Lyrical.
It's Bilyeu. Anyway, on his show, he's interviewing her, and she is talking about.
Bilyeu. Milieu.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's what I
Like
would.
milieu.
There's a
right?
Yeah,
fourth
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Wait, don't lose it. Don't lose it. Keep going. Come on.
So so she is describing what the brain is doing at very fundamental levels, right? So all the time, our brain is producing predictions. And I think we all pretty much understand this, right? Everywhere we're going, our brain, and when we're talking about mixing and priming of the brain to hear what it wants to hear, this is what we're talking about. And the priming, we call it priming, but she's describing what that priming is. And so the brain is taking in stimulus. It's sort of reaching for previous, into memory for previous instances of something similar, and it's making predictions. This is what the brain is doing all the time. Yeah. And it makes predictions in the form of action plans. Right? And when you think about meaning, like people say the brain is a meaning-making machine, this is what it means. It's that the brain is taking in sensory information and deciding what it means and forming an action plan. And that's what the prediction is. It's priming all of your sensory information to perceive what it predicts is going to happen. Right? So this notion of action plan, like your body, you go into a situation and it's fearful. Now you get like the hormones up, the thing, touch sensitivity, eyesight is focused. It's actually, the action plans are just, you are a rolling action plan machine. Yeah. And in some way, I think what Michael's talking about, like if you're having a conscious action plan, can counteract the sort of amygdala primitive action plans that are always rolling in the head. And you're just sort of subject to whatever you're exposed to. It's a sort of reactivity. So if you don't have a sort of conscious action plan to contain and control it, it's just going to roll and be whatever it is. And so you've got, whenever you're talking about action plans, you're talking about controlling and curtailing and corralling the sort of ongoing action plans that the brain is producing that may or may not be serving you.
The cost of this I haven't heard that podcast, but you explained at dinner the other night that the cost of this and the cost of social uncertainty.
Social ambiguity.
Ambiguity.
Whether people like you or not, how they feel about you or don't, and blah, blah, blah. It actually fucks up your metabolism. It actually dysregulates your metabolism over time at a cellular level.
Yeah.
That was
really
crazy
deep shit.
Yeah, really
crazy shit. And we're talking about clear commitments. We're so attracted to clear commitments, and that's really an antidote to this sort of thing.
So can we make a clear commitment that we'd love to have this woman on our podcast?
I put in the Trello, I listened to that, and I wrote more notes about that conversation than any in the last couple of years.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's very interesting. I'd love to talk to her.
Yeah. Any framing that sort of begins to address the real linkages between what we think and feel and what we imagine we're in control of and the actual mechanics
and what we think
underneath.
is happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're mixing, it's like
that's the frontier right
we
now.
don't realize that we are predicting what we're going to hear all the time, constantly, and you can't.
And then when we have visual aid like analyzers too, that comes into play too.
Yeah. That's my argument against dynamic EQ. I'm telling you, if you couldn't see the screen, dynamic EQ does not work like people think it works. I challenge everyone out there this week to not look at the screen and run the track down and imagine, especially as we get lower in frequency, imagine what's happening with your dynamic EQ. I'm not sure that it's doing what you think it's doing.
Like do a print with dynamics
on.
Talk
to me about this right now.
Because
I'm getting really good results from it.
I know you are, but I
talk to me.
What I love about the way that you mix is how quickly you move and how much you trust the outcome. You're not attached to ideas. You do, as we explored in other episodes, you do value the consistency that comes from having known tools, simple selection of tools, a rig that's stable, but you're not attached to ideas and concepts and workflows like other people I've met who are like, well, you always do the 1176 into the LA2 or the vocal is trash. And it's like, that's just not true.
There's been a lot of evolution in Jon's workflow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I've never, now granted it's in a mastering context, but I've almost never been able to make dynamic EQ stick. And what I think, I have a theory that I'm evolving. It's too soon to really talk about it, and I want to work with someone to understand this more. But what I do know for sure is that what's happening on the screen is not what's happening to the audio, almost across the band. Now, are good things happening to the audio? Maybe. Is it doing what the pretty picture in FabFilter is telling you? Absolutely not. Because of the way that our ears integrate dynamic changes over time. So you remember the other week we were talking about Doug's podcast and how he's talking about the VT7.
Yeah.
And the amazing way that the VT7 uses pulse width modulation to control the level.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, when we're talking analog compressors, there are different ways of controlling the level. There's VCAs, which are a bunch of transistors, which you can use to control the level. There's FETs, like in an 1176, which you use to control the level. There's optos, which is a light source and a light dependent resistor.
Illegal now, right?
Yeah. Kind of.
Europe
Yeah,
or something?
it's we should ask Jakob about that.
Yes,
He's got some great takes on that.
Yeah.
And the VT7 and very few other compressors, maybe an old EMT
ST8
156 and the Crane Song.
Yeah.
STC8. They use a thing called pulse width modulation, and what it does is you take a FET, a fast transistor, and you switch the signal on and off, just on and off, nothing else. 500,000 times a second, whatever, 500K, 400,000, something of that order. And you, by varying the on-off pulses, the length of how long it's on and how long it's off, and then doing a low-pass filter on it, you can basically transparently change the gain. So anyway, that's an aside, just to say that I don't think our ears can hear these fast changes in gain that are happening in dynamic EQs. I think the way our ears integrate, especially lower mid-range and bass frequencies over time, that these beautiful pictures of the little dynamic EQ dropping and taking away that tom hit or whatever. Toms, that's an old-fashioned way of thinking about it. But that's not actually happening.
That's pitch dependent. That's a good example.
Sure. But it's not happening. The way our ears integrate that is that if it's short enough, we ignore it. And if it's long enough, a static gain ride would have done just the same thing.
So you're saying if it's short enough, it's as if you just did an EQ cut.
It's just like changing that pulse width modulation.
Gotcha.
It's just the overall level drops for that second by a half a dB, and it's basically a non-thing.
Well, if it's sidechained to a kick drum,
sure, over a longer,
you've got more interactions to consider.
Over a longer period. What I'm saying is that consistently I've wanted this to work for me, and it has never worked. And I see mastering engineers
in mastering,
and they're weekly someone shares a screenshot of FabFilter doing some fucking insane shit to a master, and it's this sort of strong arm heroic thing. And it's just, it's insane to me. It's insane.
Yeah, in a mastering context, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But in a mixed context, reduction over time also makes sense on individual instruments, right? So if say you're dynamically reducing lower mid-range by 2 dB pretty consistently, and at some point it hits 4 or 6 because it gets more and more dense in that area, It strikes me difficult to believe that we couldn't hear that change
over longer periods of time. Definitely,
yeah.
Now, like I said, working theory, some ideas I have, but what I do know is that the pictures do not reflect what's happening, because if you, as I have done, spend some time setting some stuff up, take a break, and come and listen for the effect that you think is happening. Once you lose the attachment to the pretty pictures, the actual rubber hitting the road is very different. So I'd encourage people to push back or investigate this, because I think there's this incredible sort of move towards dynamic EQ being the answer to every problem, and they just didn't exist before, and great records were made.
Well, so okay, you have dynamic EQ on a guitar, right? And it's sort of, let's say it's in a fast release sort of mode, which is indistinguishable from a cut.
A static cut
Let's
over
say.
time.
Yeah, a static cut. But when you get to a section where it's not playing as loud, it's warmer and whatever.
That's
and
what
it's sort of like automating an on-off of that cut.
That's my use of it.
Okay,
That's exactly
but I don't like the misleading language of the dynamic, because it's not really dynamic.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
The dynamic movement
could be causing distortion, though. Yeah.
It comes at the cost of significant distortion.
Yeah.
And the thing
that's
is
interesting.
that
Okay.
if let's
if it's changing the shape of the wave, if
it's adding a ton of harmonics. Now,
Yes, exactly.
this is like I say, these are ideas I have. This is not science, right? But I'm exploring a hypothesis.
Love this so much.
Here's the thing: is that these if the net effect is the guitar in the verse is -2 on average at 4K, and the guitar in the chorus is -4 at 4K. Then if you were to automate a static, Pro Q3 and just did that, or split the track and did clip gain or clip EQ or whatever, a simple static version of that, you would have a much lower distortion version of the same output. So I think what people imagine is that I think people are hearing what they're seeing, and I'm not hearing it when it comes to me in the mastering room or the kid on AirPods, because I think it's just one of the things that's contributing to this incredible roar of distortion that we hear on so many records. Just this haze, this vagueness, this kind of wash of distortion everywhere is leaning on too many multi-band, splitting tools and.
That I completely agree with.
And combined with
dynamic
parallel stuff.
The parallel in itself isn't an evil. It just sort of dilutes most processes. It
Yes.
isn't.
But the phase relationships in plugins, people trust them as if they're all phase
Saturn
when they're not.
Saturn
Definitely
1
not.
sounded terrible when you took the mix
Definitely.
down to
Tube?
90%.
With Tube?
Yeah, it was awful.
And there
Saturn
are-
2 is a bit better. It's still noticeable.
There
Still
are,
there. Use that shit in 100% modes.
There is one dynamic EQ that I use. It's called Nova by Tokyo Dawn, and they have, because the EQ is minimum phase, the parallel stuff doesn't really work. And they're like, "Well, you're a grown up, you should know this." But 17-year-old kid in his basement doesn't know this. So it's a complicated thing. But the point where we jumped off and where we should land again is, don't trust the pictures. What's happening to your audio is not what the picture is saying. The pictures are pretty and they're sexy and they're it goes to our text thread earlier about an engineer we were talking about who I believe to be obsessed with the pictures, on a enthralled by the pictures and how good those plugins look, without listening to what they're doing.
Because the visual stimulus will enhance the faulty predictions your brain is making about what you're going to hear, and priming your nervous system to perceive what it predicts is coming. And so the pictures are going to enhance that.
Exactly. And
it'll be less of the emotional connection and more of the prediction.
Exactly. And if we zoom out enough, how many times have you been fed by your ears over your eyes? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Your eyes, they have sort of they're higher in the order of senses we pay attention to, I think. And they're definitely, they have a kind of a dominance.
Right. The hierarchy of interesting.
I'm just having a very specific thought about this dynamic EQ. I know we jumped back and landed. I find that transients stay more intact with dynamic EQ versus other tools, right? So let's take dynamic EQ and EQ as separate things, but dynamic EQ versus multi-band compressors with crossover points.
100% agreed.
Right?
Every time.
Right? So I'm kind of curious on, hey, Michael's back. Kind of curious on this distortion part of it. But when you put, look, on something that's really dense, really loud, like a Rhodes with full 200 hertz, like roaring away, and you control that with a dynamic EQ, I don't hear distortion, right? I'm sure there's distortion, but on PMCs, on the highest level monitoring that we could find, the lowest volume and clarity and transparent converters, like I don't hear it, right? So yeah, the more and more you do that and add up, it can get there.
Yeah.
But I want to say that that's the least of the worries of what you're talking about with this kind of phasey, incoherent, distorted, blurry mix that's dominating in a lot of
So
senses.
the harmonics are going to be. How do we know what character they're taking? You know, if it's an 808 and you're saying, okay, we do a narrow, dynamic, extreme EQ thing, it's going to cause some harmonics, right? On a pure sine wave, you should be able to hear this.
Yep.
You
think.
can measure it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I mean,
You can measure it, right?
I've spent a lot of time
Yeah.
looking at these things.
And so,
Do you make records?
I do occasionally, but
kidding.
I've gone down rabbit holes.
So have you noticed this?
but
Oh yeah, for real. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, again, coming at it from, you know, I don't want to get bogged down in this as the opener of the episode by any means.
We don't do this a lot though, and this is
Yeah.
helpful for people that are
And-
fucking around with new tools. So
You know, again, I want to state the only thing I'm saying for sure is think about the pictures and the relationship to what you're hearing.
Yeah, of
that's
course.
the only
Okay,
thing I'm
cool.
saying for sure.
I'll
Everything
I'll
else,
let it all go.
skeptical of the pictures.
be skeptical of the pictures
because
and
of what they're doing to your expectations.
to prime your
Well, I've
expectations.
talked about this on other platforms. I don't think I've ever said it here, but Dale years ago brought to my attention that in general, every EQ with an analyzer, the frequencies are different than what they say they are, and all of them are different in different ways, right? So if you think you're reducing 220 hertz in a Fab Filter Pro Q3, you might actually be reducing 240 hertz, right? It could be 20 hertz off of what the graph is saying. So you should always check. So he used to tell me in mastering, because it's on the 2-track, he would check 10 and 20 above the cut to trust his ears with the plugin closed. He would go up 10, down 10, up 20, down 20 from the cut that he made was to just check and see if it was better and do that on fresh ears and come back to that move.
every time.
Every time. And I do that on almost every move that I make on individual instruments. It's quite insane.
For me, the analyzer isn't in the conversation at the start, but every move you listen, best guess, 300.
Right.
Cut at 300 a dB. Okay.
Listen.
Pretty good. Slow, groove, move. Yeah, like just what you're doing. We're both nodding our heads and kind of grooving in the chair. And then it's like, okay, down to 250. Lost some energy. Up to 350. That's clearer.
Yep.
Take a break. Again, one more time. 350. Down to 300. No, 350. Done.
Yeah.
Decision made. And on.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, maybe half a dB instead of a dB. But that thing of sort of best first guess, you know, make a call and then just rock up and down from it, and just to see if you can nuance it a touch.
It's like if Michael was designing any sort of type, and he's like, oh, let's round the J a little bit more. Let's look at it. All right, cool. That looks tight. Let's try it this way. And like, we know it's going to be a J, and we know it's going to be slightly round. It could be a form of cursive that he's hand drawing. And like, that's the practice. It's like, the first one isn't always the one.
Yeah.
And be open for it not to be the one. And you're talking, you know, you brought up in the context of the example of dynamic EQ that, and when I pushed back on it, that I mix fast and I go off instinct. But within that, I'm fast enough to also make those moves on instinct too. So that's part of the practice.
Completely.
You know?
And what I you know,
But that's
what
practice.
sets you apart from most of your peers is your ability to interrogate the reality of the outcome.
Yeah.
Like you'll say, you know, I know so many people who are attached to the idea that they had, they're not interrogating the outcome. They're not actually listening to what happened. They're like, this is a baller vocal chain. It's like, are you listening to the same thing I'm hearing?
That sounds like John's AirPods and iPhone mode. Like, it's like a mode switch in your brain.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
This mode switch that we're always talking about is maybe hard for you and me and easier for John. John's better at it.
Maybe.
That's one of those modes. It's like, you know, I've been a part of that transition from the rig over to the iPhone speaker, and it's like, oh, like John seems to be in a different frame of mind. He's not analytical in that way. He's sort of taking it in as a layman. He's able to switch modes. You know, this spending time with Michael, you know, you bring up Michael and design and whatever, and actually what we're talking about is a problem for audio engineers, this visual stuff that is priming our expectations and choking off or limiting our ability to hear and feel. This open question we have about, is this visual stimulus really making us worse audio engineers? But in working with Michael, we were actually designing visuals to prime people.
Mm-hmm.
Our purpose is to do that, right? We are trying to shape expectations through graphic design, through visuals. And so I think that brought me into better understand the power of visual stimulus in shaping ideas and expectations.
Interesting, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's a lovely sort of insight into this cross-disciplinary thing and how much value you can get by... You ever watch a plumber like install a toilet? Just like really watch them?
No.
It's like really, really fucking interesting to watch someone who does something entirely different to you and just the little things they do to settle it on the wax seal, or why did you adjust the you know, whatever the little thing that bobs up and down in the water? Why did you set all the way to the end and then dial it back from there? Why not all the way to the top and dial it in from there?
Yeah.
They have like
I
these
was
little
watching every part of the tire repair today.
Same thing.
I was just
we gotta.
So interested in the tire repair. That's what else am I going to do with my time? Look at my phone? Like, there's enough on my phone.
Yeah.
I watched them fix my tire.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
No, and you gave us a blow by blow on text, which was great. We were here setting up.
They
laughing
had it
about
off the car and the wheel off the rim in 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Because of tools.
It's like a pit stop. It's like F1.
It was a pit stop. Yeah, it was like F1. It was insane to me.
And how many reps does that dude have on, you know?
Yeah.
And the things he can tell.
And they've got
I wanted to ask them, like, how many of this do you do per day? Like how you know, what's your output? What's your process? How many people does it take to do this? When do you get your breaks? Like, I was so interested in these things. I don't know. Anyway, keep going.
No, I love it.
I've never watched a plumber do a toilet, but I've watched someone install a kitchen in my home.
Same thing. It's not about plumbing. The point is watching someone who does something wildly different to us and really watching them and noticing the lovely nuance to their work, and not necessarily craftsmen, simple stuff. Michael, you're back and we lost you.
Wait, hold on. Before we pivot, I want to just completely round about this dynamic EQ thing and the idea of pictures. And just to say, because I love admitting these things, I have very few handicaps on my mix template, but I'm going to take off the one dynamic EQ that I have in my ozone on my master bus. It's so minimal, but it's going to come off if it's inducing any added distortion that I'm not controlling. So I'm going to, because of this conversation, just take it off. So I just want to state that.
Yeah. I'd love to hear what you find.
Yeah.
You, like I say, you know, with so many things, when people ask about you, it's like, John's an anomaly. Don't do what John does. He's very different.
He found his own way.
Yeah. And, but in general, the like I say, the takeaway is just think about that relationship between, you know, I see all over Instagram and I see in everyone's rooms and we're going in, the things people are doing. It's like, why is that bouncing around on your mix bus? What is it doing and what do you think it's doing?
Yeah.
And if someone really hears it and likes it, then knock yourself out like every time. You know, I don't really care if you want to put the mix through a pair of rat pedals. If that's your gig and you're enjoying it and you're feeling it,
and people want you to do that and ask you to do it. That's different.
I hate the idea of people thinking they're buying one thing and getting another.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
buying pretty
cool.
pictures.
Let's jump over to Michael.
Yeah,
I just wanted to round
pictures.
that out.
Michael, you look something changed about how you look, and it's very impressive. We've got this sort of forced perspective thing with the ceiling sort of framing you, and you've got this up light or down light, whatever's going on. It's intense.
The cinematography is lovely.
Yeah, it is a little bit
Looks like
Godfather.
Twin Peaks. Well,
Yeah, Twin
Godfather,
Peaks,
Cool. We got
it's
the
got-
status road trip merch.
Yeah.
Very
I
nice.
had Christopher Nolan come by and just set my
Just give it a once
MacBook
over.
Pro up.
What kind of lens have
sure
you got on
we're-
that MacBook
I
Pro?
had him
What are we
tilt the
looking at?
lid on my MacBook.
He kept the
for me.
same lens though. Wow, a few things I wanted to say.
Do it.
So I asked the community if they had any topics that were on their mind. Previously, I'd asked, is there anything you want us to talk about or do? And I realized that people were kind of coming to us with questions that were like, after seeing the questions and the work that you guys put into generating these questions, like they weren't as formed, and it felt like people were trying really hard to form it, to their credit, like in the best way, but it's really hard to make a good question. So it felt like people were sending questions. This time I was like, what are you thinking about? What's been on your mind this week? And I think the responses were so much deeper. So I'm going to continue to do that. But yeah, we got more of them and they felt deeper this time. And someone wrote about work-life balance, and then I'm thinking about this guy repairing John's tire, and I'm like, does he ever think about work-life balance? Like, is this guy,
He's just trying to balance the tire.
Dude, there were 4 guys in this shop, all of them on their phones. One guy chose to repair my tire. Everyone was on their phone, and one guy was like, I got this.
Yeah, he's like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I just finished my Call of Duty mobile. I'm ready to play. I'm ready to do this tire.
But those guys are crushing at 637. They're by 4 or 5. They're like checked out.
Yeah.
They've been doing it all day.
Fair.
Yeah. Props to them for real. Well, a lot of great topics came up. The one that I started art club with came up. This 2021 intentions or 2021. What are you thinking about there? I know this year has been kind of crazy, and we have one more episode until the new year. So I was curious if you guys have been thinking any bit about this. I guess it feels a little different for me that I'm away and like I'm in a different context, and I'm kind of feeling the holiday. Every day I walk and I see like people's lights coming on, like they put all the lights out. And so I'm really feeling this end of year festivity, new year kind of vibe. I'm wondering where you guys are at with that, how you're feeling about that.
I'm
if
just
you
feeling
have any
jealous hearing that description of your environment. John has a 10-foot tree.
Yeah, just shy of 10.
Not this week. It's lit up and it's full of ornaments and it's giving me good feelings. I've taken my picture with it.
There's a wreath on the door when you come upstairs to the gift shop.
Yes, there's a wreath. I was wreath shopping this year, but LA never really quite feels like Christmas on the East Coast or the holidays on the East Coast or whatever.
Yeah, like these suburban Christmas lights, or even in the cities too. I remember in Greenpoint every year, the main street in Greenpoint, I guess it was Greenpoint Ave, they would put out all the lights like across the street. It was such a beautiful
across the intersection,
time.
hang that big snowflake in the middle. I remember taking photos of it a couple years ago.
So nice. But about the question, is there anything looking back last year, and I would love to get as personal as possible about all this, looking back last year where it's like, I guess before I even ask the question, I kind of rephrase the question. Today I was talking to a really close friend I went to school with. He just got laid off from a gig that he's been working on for the past 2 years. Thought he was a freelancer, but it was kind of like, they made it seem that it was pretty permanent, and then bam, all of a sudden, December 8th, he gets laid off. And now he's kind of going through things and trying to figure out what to do. And we got into it. I was like, looking back, like forgetting about all that for a second, and I called him to kind of help him level set and give him some different perspective. But, I was asking him about it. What, using Rory's terminology, his name's John as well. So what does John 3.3 look like as a 33-year-old John? And what does 3.4 look like? And what about version 3.2? Did you improve in 3.3? And what are you looking to improve in 3.4? So it just has me thinking like, we're always getting better. We'll never be the best version of ourselves, but we'll be a better version of ourselves. And I'm curious what areas, what feature upgrades you're interested in exploring.
I got a couple of things. That jumped to mind for John 3.5 coming right up.
Yeah.
I'll be 35 in March, so I'm pretty pumped about that. What was the last bit on the chart that you went in on the not the aim, the outcome? What was the bit that you're talking about the predictions in the brain that are
action plan?
Action plan.
Plans, yeah.
I never had an action plan, and you guys at this table helped formulate action plans. So I have a really specific action plan that I'd like to do next year. Also, let's just talk about the career pivot really briefly into the recording. 3 projects are already booked with artists that I would die to work
Are you
with.
serious?
Yeah. As of yesterday morning at tennis, Nathaniel told me 2 more, and I was
Come
like,
on.
really? Like, I would never have access to even mix these projects.
This is what I'm saying.
You know, so that's already like, okay, you make a decision, you make a pivot, and you're like, oh wow, I'm gonna work with that person. I really like listening to that person's music. You know,
I'm getting a little.
I'm gonna help. I'm gonna help make it
right here in the
you know?
feed. Yeah, like a little.
So
Chuffed, right?
My point.
More, it's like it's a little. Fucking, there's a little buzz in my body.
Yeah, me too. That's the
wine.
That's the
guys.
wine. It's all done then.
I feel it as
that's good.
pride,
Yeah.
and I know John doesn't like this word, but
I hate this word.
I actually looked it up, and it's like deep satisfaction from the accomplishments of oneself or others.
Yeah.
It's like a pleasure from accomplishment.
I like
It doesn't have
Sam Harris's point of view that that's not how people use it most of the time. So if you're not going to use it that way, you might as well forfeit it. But if you're aware of it to that degree, and then sure. The only reason I'm bringing it up is because it's such and talking about the. Damn, this is definitely the wine's fault. What's that term that you were talking about?
Action plans?
Action plans.
Action plan.
The notion of action plans it hasn't been the best day, guys.
Good, man.
It's a red wine
We are
kind of
so
day.
good right now.
The moment I decided to make an action plan for next year, that this is what's happening, and I know it's not going to stop at these 3 artists.
It's
Right? It's going to
snowballing.
snowball.
Let's put a point on that. John didn't decide to make an action plan for next year. This poured out of you.
Yeah,
because this is all documented.
inspiration.
This was this moment of like, but what if we did this? And like that you had with Spider in the car. It's like,
it just happened.
Yeah.
And it's working. I mean, we'll see if it works, but it'll work. You know,
It's gonna work.
But my point, that just touching on that, the action plan is actually something. And going back to John 3.3 to John 3.4, and Michael's been a big part of this. Branding and naming the gift shop and the studio and my home, it's centered around the value of generosity and bringing people to the dinner table, starting engineer evenings, just cooking feasts and opening dialogue and community, and the possibility of connecting humans in a non-networking fashion, like, you know,
True sharing.
just in true sharing mode. And then the last 3 days, I'll say the last week has been the slowest week of the year for me. And I used that time to Christmas shop, right? Whether it be online or in stores. And I had the most fun I've had all year coming up with gift concepts. What I'm referring to as complete gift concepts. So I can't use examples because 2 of you at the table, one of you was given their gift today, and it was one very specific just laser focused after conversation after conversation. I gave Rory a bottle of wine that was in the region that he loves by one of the best producers in that, whatever. But the other 2 of you have a 3-piece gift that's a trajectory, right? And they all exist as one thing. And it's this aim of generosity that I'm really trying to stand behind and hone. So John 3.5, I hate referring to myself in the third person, but I'm just doing it to play the game that you started. Next year, I want to be even better at giving, right? So thinking about Sam and the, what's the altruism?
Will McClaskill.
Yeah, giving.
The
Effective
altruism movement.
Yeah.
Figuring out things like that and where and what's the most effective way to give, and whether it be to the community or people that you have no idea who they are and what they're doing. But
Bed nets in Africa.
malaria bed nets and things like that, and really trying to hone in to the name, the gift shop, and why. And I think we had the idea of doing this early on, but I wasn't really in the full mindset because I didn't have. I still keep forgetting the name of this term that.
Action plan.
Action plan. See, these words and these terms are just so.
Yeah.
I'm just not attracted to them, so I can't.
You
They don't
and I,
stick
man,
with
they don't
me.
stick.
I'm looking at Rory.
They don't stick.
They don't stick, but it's so effective,
But
right?
no,
Like,
when you
there's-
feel the value of them over time, then they integrate.
That's
I think what I'm adverse to about them is the non-flexibility that you have once you're aware of the power of these words. Is like, oh, well, then I have to have an action plan. And most of my life has been not action plan that I've
Well, as we just discussed, you are creating action plans on an ongoing basis at a neurological
And I'm
level.
sure a lot of other people are.
No, that's what our brain does.
What we're doing,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So I would like to practice the giving of. I mean, I'm just having so much fun coming up with gifts, and money doesn't matter, right? It's not about that. It's about like, what is this person? It's mostly about. This is also selfish, and I'll just be real. Most of them are things that I would get myself. So it's also a.
That's like shit.
It's a practice of
It's
like
funny.
I'm not. This is something that I purchased, but I'm going to give to someone
want
else.
it,
But
but I'm
I
giving it to
wanted
you.
this.
Yeah.
This is awesome. This is like we share this aesthetic. This is something that all of us share together. That if I go to your home, we will use these things probably together because you'll want to share that with me as I would want to share it with you in my home. So there's a whole concept
Communal
behind.
vibes.
And I think that just thinking about what these last few days were, and then Michael's question, I think I can do that even more regularly. Yeah, that's what I would like 3.5 to
I
be.
think generosity it's a great ambition, to be better, more effective, whether it be with loved ones, having impact, deepening the connection, providing pleasure and joy. I mean, that's just the definition of making the world a better place. I think like
Well, when you put it that way.
well, there are so many ways that you're doing it. I mean, it's really the spirit of your mix practice is generous. You are generous to other engineers, with your clients. It's I think it's a beautiful value to rally around and to focus on and to try to get better at.
I thought about something specific on that note today. I was coming back from Mini Kebab on the way here. And then when I got to the tire thing, I quickly checked my email because Josh was up here, as you guys know, working and delivering this thing. That was a really fast turnaround. A song that we mixed 3 versions of, and they decided they want to use like a demo version of the song that's only piano and strings and vocal. And they were like, we need to deliver this by Friday. I know you already mixed 3 other full produced versions, but can you do this? And then I got an email back from the producer and the head of the label, the same person, saying, wow, thank you so much for prioritizing this. I know it was a big ask. And I just wrote back without hesitation, like, I love working with you guys. And I know that's different. I know that's not a common response. And I'm trying to lean into that more. And I'm not going to say that just to anybody, but I genuinely didn't know what else to say except for, of course I prioritize it. I love working with you. And that's exactly how it felt typing it. And I hope that's how it's translating because that's exactly what I felt. I love working with this team. They're from Sweden and they work with great artists and they're just so polite. They're so professional. The stems come in, they sound exactly like it's supposed to sound. And if there's a mistake, it's so rare and they fix it right away. And like
It's crucial.
it's crucial.
I had a client during the week from last week in Nashville apologize for sending a note. She's a young artist, maybe on her 3rd single and youngish, and she, asked for a note sort of tentatively. I did the revision and sent it, and with no comment, and she apologized that she loved it. Rev 1 is way better. Love it. Sorry for like making you do that. And I was like, here's what I didn't say in the first email. I couldn't find a way to do your note. Like everything I tried to do to tweak the master I had, which was the best I could do, didn't work. It made it worse. So I just deleted the master I had and started over.
Right.
And we ended up in a better place. And I was like, that's, in a short version of the email, I said, that's why there's 3 of us on this thread.
Yeah.
There's you, the artist, the mixer, who I trust implicitly, and me. And you came back with a note that I didn't quite understand and couldn't make happen, but it forced me to revisit the whole thing and my previous assumptions, and it's better. It's just better.
Yeah, we landed somewhere. That,
So like, don't apologize next time because it's cool, like you say, sometimes the client is a pain in the ass and there's nothing good to say. And you're just like, here you go. And there's the invoice. But when there is something good to say, it's worth sharing.
Yeah. Can you keep talking and answer Michael's question?
I wanted to say 2 things about the mechanics of this thing, because I was going to turn the question on Michael because today we agreed on the text thread. Michael I was thinking about it on the way down. Let me allow me a little diversion, and then we'll come back to the topic. I was thinking on the way down about how teams of people have strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes when there's some person in the team who's really good at stuff like systems and organizing and gathering data and making it useful, like Michael, the rest of the team sort of leans into that in a way that can be really useful, or sometimes in a way that can sort of promote laziness and underutilize other assets. So we agreed, at least Michael and I did on the thread today, that he had reached out to Instagram and gathered these questions, but that he wasn't going to ask them of us, because I'm much more interested, not more, I'm as interested in Michael's answers to these questions. And I've got them all on my phone. And I save them as pictures so I could ask them. So I want to hear Michael's answer to the question he posed. I can talk for fucking Ireland, and I will later. But right now, I want to hear your answer to that question, especially because I know you're in a moment of change, and your perspective is different because you're 3,000 miles, east of here. So what you got?
Yeah. That's like the question equivalent of "I know you are, but what am I?" Just
No, that's not true. This is coming from a very pure place. The other point, I want to credit the question askers.
Yes.
I had a moment today where someone reached out to Spider and I and thanked us just unprovoked for the podcast. Thanked the four of us, obviously, but he's a client of ours. And my response back immediately was just, dude, that means a lot, and we love building the community. So the fact that people, specific people, are coming back to us with questions. Steve K, I don't have all the names here because of the way the screenshots. Camilo Velez, Aidan Thilman. There's a bunch more. You probably have the names, Michael.
Jeff Braun, Nathan
I want to shout out
Phillips,
the people because
Jamie Hamburg.
Like a record,
Ty.
a record without a listener is not. It's not a complete piece of art. A podcast without an audience, especially what we're trying to do, it's more than entertainment. It's where I'm hoping it's kind of quite an honest interrogation of ideas and maybe a little vulnerable and at times.
We're working in the background to bring the interaction with the audience into a more intimate level than our texting.
So let's start by giving credit to our questioners who made the effort to reach
questioners and contributors, because when people, like Michael's saying, people are raising sort of topics that they would like to hear us comment on. It's different to a question, but like equally valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And it goes so far as to even just, looking at the stories and responding to a poll that we put up, or, sending a reaction, a laugh, or a flame emoji. I mean, we get so many of them every day, and it actually doesn't feel like work at all when I'm managing this account, because it's like so personal to me. And then seeing the response is like, it's really humbling, and it's also, it just brings me so much joy to know that four of us can generate such an impact into an individual's life at scale. And that's just, it's great. So this question came from Jared Masters, who
just sent 2 flame emojis.
He's funny. He's good at the internet. Him and I have been talking a bunch. He just released a record. He's a music maker, producer, all the things. But he sent in this question. And he wrote, "I think a reminder to all creatives to reset intentions for the coming year, to reassess their expectations for what their art is doing for them and what they expect from their pursuit of art. I'd love to hear more in-depth convo from the group about that. And I just like this idea of 2021 intention. Sorry. I hope this year doesn't repeat. For me, so anyway, thank you, Jared. For me, I think walking around, I've been doing now 7-mile hikes a day. My legs are like huge. Tree trunks, Christmas. They're still.
Congratulations!
I'm still really small. But I've been walking so much more now, and during the time, it's super, super meditative. I talked about it kind of on the last call, but I think to me, what version 3.4 really, I mean, it just turned 33, but 3.4, what I would like to see is even more of an awareness around all the things, feelings, thoughts, emotions, behaviors, people, just a clearer picture there. And I know that definitely comes from meditation, and it comes from bringing up the ideas. I don't want to say rehearsing the ideas, but exploring the ideas with people. And I think it's kind of a mix of both. So I think just getting closer to like what feels really true to me, whether that's where I live, whether that's the people I have around or don't want to have around, the things I'm doing, projects I'm taking on, all the things, I think just getting closer to, I don't want to say me as if that's like a fixed thing, but like how it feels in that moment, not really putting too much pressure on changing what feels natural to me. So I think, I don't know, just maintaining that connection to myself and strengthening that connection a little bit more in terms of how I'm feeling in certain moments and stuff like that. So I don't know if that was clear.
It's clear.
More than happy to answer any questions about it, but yeah.
We're kind of into the terrain that words don't do a great job of covering. I mean, it's tricky stuff to explain in a way that's clear, but I think I know what you mean. I think you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and it was, for me, the very short version of 2021 is own it, own my ability, own my my personality, own my history, own the stuff that I've been through, and the things I have to offer the world. Just being on mic here, we're this episode 19, so it's 19 times 2.5 hours. It's a lot of time of saying what I think and being honest about the Beach Boys.
Wow. I've listened to every episode more than once.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I love
That's amazing.
listening to you guys, which is why I keep hanging out with you.
I have an interesting relationship. I have to be careful when I press play. If I'm in a bad mood, I can get very self-critical.
Overly critical.
Yeah. I'm sure that's not shocking, but anyway, that's the short version of my 2021, is just continuing to own it, and hopefully be clearer about what it is I'm trying to do.
Well, that is my 2021. That is my project right now, is clarity. That having too many separate to-do lists has divided me internally. It's caused social ambiguity, right, in my work relationships. And I am very much looking forward to having a clearer set of responsibilities, a simpler life, where, similar to the way that we drill down on ideas, like when a client says, "Hey man, I want some new speakers," and you say, they want new speakers, but why do they want new speakers? What's behind that? It's like, oh, they want like a functioning studio. And it's like, oh no, actually they want confidence, right? So there are these layers. And for me, sort of helping remove obstacles in front of people, leveraging whatever experience I have and people I have access to and whatever, to me, finding a way to do that, to bring maximum good to the world, including myself. To me, it's time to make choices. It's time to make choices about what I'm going to do, because as being spread too thin, one, you start, this chronic stress level goes up, right? Trying to manage too many things. And then the release valve for that anxiety is often the actual work itself suffers, right? The accuracy, the timeliness, whatever it may be. So yeah, clarity is the number one thing for me, and clarity will come from simplicity and the clear commitments to my partners. It's like, no, I got this. This is what I have. This is what you can depend on me for. And being there and not having easy excuses or have loaded up myself with too many things to do, underestimated what I could, overpromising, all this sort of thing. I want to experience far less of that next year. And so, I am relying on you guys and other friends of ours to help me around that corner so that I have some new agreements going into next year. It's pretty late in the game, but since I started at PMC, what'll be now 3 years ago, I've been sort of working on. This is advice I got from a very good friend of mine, who, when I took the gig at PMC, thought that my job description was too vague and encouraged me to try to narrow it.
He wasn't wrong.
He wasn't wrong, man. And just given the growing pains of an organization that has had a tremendous reputation of being hands-on and, in the studio with clients and being, so helpful as they were to me as I was a client, like eight years before I started with the company, to scale out, to try to reach more people. Through those growing pains, we have found specialization. I mean, we have new people on the team who are professional, who do very specific things very well. And so, this is a sort of a long curve, but like now it's really time to hit the new year with new agreements, new contracts, new arrangements that are simplified, streamlined, and where I'm doing maximum good.
Can I tag on the question briefly? And I mean, just not everyone has to answer it or whatever, but when you think about your goals for this year, did you hit them? Such as they were, and it may not have been as clear as what we're trying to do for next year, but if you had ideas of what this year was about for you, did it meet those expectations in as much as?
I didn't have any goals.
Yeah, I didn't have any like super clear goals. Like I need to do this thing, this much of that thing on this date,
No
but
metrics.
There wasn't. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so
ambition more. Let's
yeah,
make
but
it
I definitely
more general.
grazed some areas and improved in some areas that I wanted to.
Those legs.
Yeah, the legs.
Tree trunks.
Which is funny because I
Redwoods.
actually
Fucking
had that thought.
redwoods.
I was
Sequoia.
like, I have the skinniest legs and I don't like it. So that was
No.
actually
I have
genuinely
the
an area.
I have the skinniest legs. Let me just
well, now
All
you
right, guys,
do,
guys.
definitely.
All right.
disabuse you of that notion.
Nobody wants to hear this.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, people.
Yeah, it's a fact. Anyway, carry on. Yeah.
No, that was an area, and just in terms of overall fitness, that I definitely wanted to improve on, and so it's cool seeing that kind of culminate towards the end of the year. But for me, it was like, I got back from New York last year. It was like January-ish, and COVID came pretty quickly after that. And my goal for this year was to get status like really off the ground, and I didn't have any more goals than that. Just knowing like, can this thing float, and I'll feel safe on this raft. So like that is floating. So are you raising your hand?
No, I'm sort of stroking the
okay.
giraffe neck of the mic stand. I don't know why. It feels soothing to me right now. And I'm looking at you.
I'll do it too, so you're not alone.
It's comforting. I don't know why.
So yeah, I mean, that was really the biggest goal for me. And I was like, look, that goal is big enough to just get this raft up and running and floating. Like, let me see if that can happen and
really
how
is,
that feels, and start halfway through. I said, all right, let me really start dialing in process a little bit more as I get more clarity. I think it was just about clarity in the business and the business model and the clientele and what was needed. And there were so many open questions that,
I mean, that's what we talked about at every coffee hang.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It was how the fuck can you get this how can you do this without anybody else?
yeah,
Really.
And so, I mean, I will say that was successful. Like
Yeah,
that's
that
great.
I
happened.
definitely agree with that.
I was able to pay for the things that I needed to pay for, and then gifts and all the things, like there wasn't, financially, there wasn't a struggle in terms of the clients and the work. It was some of my favorite design work I've ever done. I feel like it reinvigorated my love for design as well, which was not necessarily a goal by any means, but it was an outcome that I was very happy about. And even given the quarantine, I mentioned fitness earlier, but given the fact that we were like in our homes, like I still found the time to make time for that. And then even, being able to make time for family at the end of the year. So I think it was successful in a lot of ways, and then in therapy and all of the things kind of talking through and working through, I think like so many new areas emerged about myself. And that was really exciting to be like, oh yeah, I knew there's always more to everyone, right? But it's like to see those new things emerging from conversations like this, from conversations like Art Club, one-on-one conversations we've had. I mean, that to me feels like a success, kind of just uncovering new layers and new understanding about myself. So I think that felt good.
That leads to, and maybe that sort of reminds me of one of the questions that I had pulled up. I was going to ask it next anyway, but your sort of rediscovery, or you're feeling that it was some of your best work. We got a great question from Jamie Hamburg. I would really love to hear a conversation about the moment you all fell in love with your prospective careers and how to recapture the enthusiasm from the moment when you're feeling burnt out.
Sounds exactly like our PMC marketing.
Yeah, I had a moment, and Spider was actually there. I don't know if he was there in that moment, but no, I think he was there in that moment when that happened. So we were working on PMC. So I've been designing, I think now it's been like 17 years, and like there has been lulls of excitement for the craft. Really, and when I break it down, it really came down to the people I was around, the culture that I was in terms of their level of appreciation for design and sort of what I had to do instead of the craft. The obstacles, the things like that are kind of eroding at it, as well as personal things and other things, right? So there was a lot chipping away at my appreciation, or rather, all the things that were in my way in life were, I was sort of directing that at, oh, maybe it's just I don't like this thing that I've been holding on to for such a long time. And and I think I wanted to rephrase that because I think it's clearly different. I think that you might think you dislike the thing or feel like you want to throw it away, and it could be that there are just other things in the way right now.
That's really important, man.
Yeah.
That happens a lot to people, I think.
A lot.
Definitely.
We were just talking to a client who experienced that. I mean, he experienced the same thing. He was like, his room was giving him so much doubt that it was challenging his sort of negative self-talk. And just started blaming his negative self-talk for the outcomes.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to that, bro.
That was the thing. I was telling my friend that today. It's like, yeah, just those moments. As soon as you get triggered by something, you now go back into that old pattern, and then it sets you down that spiral. I mean, it can happen. And yeah, so, but related, I mean, start working on the PMC gig. I'm deep into design again. And Spider's just so excited about it. And seeing someone's raw enthusiasm about design as a trade, and me bringing the professionalism about design and all the things I know it can do when given the clear road, like when there's less obstacles in the way and more support and more rallying. I often think about this cycling metaphor, thanks to Spider. When there's more of that, it's just, I was super excited about design, and all of a sudden, but I was still kind of on that peak. I was coming to the peak, and then all of a sudden I found out that Milton Glaser, the designer of the I Heart New York logo and the Brooklyn Brewery graphic design and Bob Dylan album covers, I mean, like countless major design artifacts and moments, and a brilliant thinker and amazing person, found out he passed away. And this was like as I was just so deep in the project, and it really hit me because I had this moment of such clarity where I was like, and Spider was definitely in the apartment at that moment, and I was like, he is doing the things that I'm doing at a different, maybe client base, and maybe he's getting paid more, and maybe he's older and whatever. But at the end of the day, at the most abstract level, we're both doing the same things. And he is like, has rallied for me his whole life. He didn't know me, but he rallied for me and every other person like me to move things a little bit more forward. And if I can move things a little more forward for the next person, like that in and of itself is amazing. Not even thinking about the output that you could do, but the output and how it moves things forward are connected. So that was like sort of the moment where I hit the 10 out of 10 on the reinvigoration of my love for design again. And it was cool because Spider was definitely there in
I
that
can
moment.
attest to the elation in the room, feeling connected to something bigger than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That you dedicate so much time and energy to, and it's bigger than you. There's something so freeing about it to know that, you know, like Glacier, like so many designers went before you and provided those influences that you had when you were young. You know, when you were just getting started, they'd done that work for you in a way. So that now you have a different starting place than they did. You know, and there's just really beautiful idea.
And think of me in Ireland 16, 17 years ago, going to the store and the Brooklyn Brewery logo catching my eyes. Like, wait, what? Wait, what? You know, it's like Heineken, all the boring, just generic beers, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Corona, the usual shite we have in Ireland. It's all the same stuff you have here. And then Brooklyn Brewery, it's like immediately, and the logo is so punchy. And like when I went to Brooklyn for the first time, I went to the Brooklyn Brewery because of that connection that was formed in a Super Value store in Killarney, Ireland 17 years ago. And he must have played some part in that. That logo
Tremendous part. The story is so amazing.
You know, when the logo can reach 3,000 miles across the ocean and land in a little, you know, supermarket on a rainy winter's night in Ireland, you've done something right.
And the other thing in that moment that happened was about competition, in air quotes. Coming up in college and in high school, I saw these grades as like competition. That's how I was framing it at the time. And it really wasn't helpful at all, but I didn't have another way of placing it. So I was like, yeah, like Milton Glacier is like competition. Like he's another designer, I'm another designer, which is like the most ridiculous thing in reality to me right now. But it felt that way. It was like, we're all just designing. We're all competing for this work. And then I was like, yeah, but they're like way better. Like whatever. They're like in a league of their own. So they're not competition. But then the people around me, maybe they are. And the other thing that has changed over the years, and definitely really, I felt like fully crystallized, and why I started Art Club actually is because it's this realization that there is no competitor. And like there are people that might take work away, that you might be competing on a project, but even still, like in the grand scheme of things, if they're helping to move things forward a little bit more and you're helping, like you're lifting the tide, right? Raising the tide for everyone. And I think to me, like when I think about Glacier lifting it for all of us, I was like, how could I be competing with these people? Like we were just helped by Michael Beirut and Paula Scher and Milton Glacier. They were lifting all of us up. You know what I mean? So like, let's just rally and do everything we can for the next generation of people. So yeah, I don't know, that greater than myself feeling was sort of how I felt like I reinvigorated what I was doing. And it then showed in the work, but it wasn't like, how can I make the best thing ever? Because that kind of talk is more from a competitive state in a way.
An ego place.
Which exactly. And instead it was like, how can I do the right thing for design, the profession, and the client, which I was going to do anyway. So, you know, like, but adding that attribute really shifted the approach.
It was a very interesting mix of emotions. You know, elation is sort of, you can picture it, right? You just see somebody is just totally lit up. You know what I mean? There's a lightness and a joy, and you can just, the pleasure is palpable. But like in a situation like this, there's the gratitude, that Michael felt for all this work, the appreciation for how, you work hard to achieve these levels, of accomplishment. So the appreciation, the gratitude, and the sense of mastery of having mastered some of this himself, or ourselves, if it's our relation. There's things we overcome in our lives to achieve these things. And there's, in a way, like, I think this is this side of it, the internal side. That's kind of like the pride piece in a way. It's like a pride in what one has done. It's the sense of mastery, that thing that keeps us going back to keep doing that same thing, for years and years and years. What we get out of it, that pleasure at putting in effort and seeing improvement, seeing growth, this sort of intimacy with one's own practice, combined with that appreciation for other people who have done it and who have dedicated so much, who have gone so deep and overcome things to achieve. I just find it very, very powerful sort of mix of emotions.
I would even add the appreciation for the people that will experience the thing.
Sure.
And which is ultimately humanity, like most humans, depending on the type of project. So you captured it really well.
I had an interesting experience this week. Everyone who listens knows I'm a huge fan of Lex's podcast.
Lex Friedman.
The Lex Friedman podcast. It used to be called the AI podcast, but now it's just the Lex Friedman podcast, I think.
Way better name.
He
AI podcast.
Well, it used to be about AI, and then just like this used to be about recording, and
it never was about recording.
Not really. But I love how much heart he brings to complicated technical stuff, and he's very much sort of a role model for me in that. But he had an incredible guest on, a guy who I've heard speak before called Manolis Kellis.
Oh, dude.
He's a computational biologist, and he is one of the most infectious humans I think I've ever heard speak.
Agreed.
But I had a kind of a heartbreak listening. So the episode starts, and, the understanding is they're going to talk about computational biology, but Lex always there's always a thread of like, what's the meaning of life, right? So he's an MIT professor, and Lex, I think the opening question was, what are 3 songs that moved you or inspired you? And immediately the guy was just like, 3? I can't do 3. I mean,
he did 8, 10.
Did you listen to the thing?
Every bit of it. I listened to it twice.
It was incredible, but I was kind of embarrassed by it because I don't have his enthusiasm right now.
For music?
How childlike and beautiful his enthusiasm was. I'm not in touch with that now.
Hold on. How is that? Oh, wait. Hold on. Express your embarrassment.
Well, okay, clumsy word.
Yeah, please.
I felt
shame.
I felt sad.
Yeah, that's different.
For the fact that I'm not as in touch with my love of music as he is.
You realized.
Hold on.
You realized a loss.
Yes, a loss. And I'm a working music professional. In many ways, I've achieved a lot of the things I set out to do. Not like, not the classic metrics, but I'm in it. I'm doing it, and I'm getting better every day, and I'm proud of that. But I definitely had a sense of, wow, I wish today I was as enthusiastic about music as this guy. You heard it, John. Like, it was beautiful.
I was going to bring this up an hour ago.
Yeah,
this exact thing. For the listeners, let's give a little backstory that this man learned to speak English through song.
Yeah,
right?
He was born in Greece. Moved to somewhere, and then the US, London, and then the US.
Maybe London. Yeah. Maybe Paris.
Yeah, it was a couple of stops.
He had to stop
but
somewhere.
He learned. He said he 100% learned English through song. So you're going to have a different relationship to song, right? He has a purely fanship admiration for song and its ability to communicate. He goes so far. This part really touched me. I have a really hard time communicating via text, whether that's text message, direct message, email, all the text forms. And he expresses the fact that melody came before language, right?
He believes, yeah.
He believes, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know if that's science, but
the ability
Apes
to perceive pitch would precede
word. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The shrieking of apes and understanding what the sounds mean is one of his examples. Anyway, so he has a highly unique relationship with song, right? It's not ours, and yours is different than mine, obviously, but ours are similar. We fell in love with listening to music, and then we began making music. So it's going to be harder for us to maintain a love for music because we do it day in, day out versus listen to it day in, day out. It's a different thing. We can actively, well, first of all, that's one part. The second part that I want to conjoin is we sometimes listen to really bad music, right? And at the beginning of our careers and through the end, depending on the circumstances, we...
what a romantic image you paint. It's going to suck at the start, brief success, and suck at the end.
It could suck.
It looks
at
like
the
one
end,
of our hill charts.
Depending on who you're doing a favor for.
It could.
But it is harder to stay objective as a lover of music when you're doing it all day. It's just, we've talked about this in probably episode 4, I think.
It is. Yeah, it was the opening of the first episode.
Yeah, is that what?
How does your relationship to it was specifically about new music.
New music.
The very opening.
I want to just push back on the sad or the embarrassment of this is expected. Right.
I don't accept that it should be. Why are we kind of like, oh well, lost the most important thing I ever fell in love with. Okay, next. Like I kind of feel a bit of a fire in me now when I hear you say it. It's like, well, this is how it is. You make records.
No. This is not how it is and should be for long extended periods of time.
Yes. Okay.
But it's going to happen. So when it happens, find something else to love. You have 2 daughters and a wife.
All the time, right?
You know what I mean? But what I'm saying is that when it has such a profound effect on one of your motor skills, it's different than a profound effect on an emotional way to communicate. Like, we fell in love with music because it told our stories in ways that we couldn't say, and it showed. Like when you read a good book and you read Seth Godin, and Seth Godin puts into your mind and thoughts and words outwardly things that you've been thinking inwardly for so long, and it's just a concise version of that. Songs can do that for our emotions, but you learn language through it. It's just a whole, like hearing a friend of mine that's a pop star now, she was from Germany and she learned English through Britney Spears. Like you're always going to have a different love of music.
Lyric writers.
Yeah, by some, not all. So I love that man was highly inspiring. His optimism and his love, I relate to him. Like he is what I think people think I am, and I am not the person that he is, right? Like
I'm not either. Yeah.
And I think people think that I have this optimism, and I'm trying to be like, I don't know, people, when I tell them that I've been depressed for a while, they're like, wait, aren't you like the happiest person that I'm like, no, I'm not the happiest. I'm like a 7, I'm like a solid base 7. I know some people that are 10s. Y'all are crazy. Sustaining a 9, 10 happiness is fantastic. But there was a point to that. And it's just that this is music fills that space a lot of the time. And I want to be okay with trying to find or understand other things that can fill that space, because I don't have them.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good place to practice.
I think I'm accepting Jon's position. Like this thing about there are more things to love is a huge deal, because that actually informs your love of music, right? This is just sort of, you should dive into anything you are drawn to creatively.
Yeah.
But the sadness that you're experiencing, this is what I'm really interested in, because I think like music has provided us peak experiences, right? and they're peak experiences. They're not the average experience, right? And so because of the nature of the brain and dopamine circuits and the concept of sensitization and normalization, you cannot maintain peak experience. Like, this is a tightrope walk to maintain peak experience.
Yeah.
Like, over time, doing the same thing.
But it's
right. But learning to accept that there are ups and downs in your relationship with music, just like you would with your wife or whatever. It's there are, again, this is like a dimension of focus.
Well,
this is a narrow dimension of focus.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that's a cure for the sadness. I'm saying accept the sadness.
We lost Michael again.
He'll dial back in. Look, I think you're right. You're both right. 100%. I think now that I'm sort of, I had the feelings and I didn't think about them. I just felt them. And then on the way down tonight, I thought, I want to mention him because Michael had sent the question, right?
Too.
And I found it inspiring and sad. But actually what I'm sad about now that we're peeling an onion layer back, I told you the story the other night, Spider, when you were for dinner, but the other night I came home and so I had a meeting with hopefully someone who'll be my new assistant. We're working on it, a plan. And it was like a 2-hour, COVID time. So instead of getting together in a building, we masked up and went for a walk at night. So
Nice.
Meet me at the studio at 8. We'll walk from there, where I live and where the studio is, all woody, old neighborhoods. So hills and great uphill, literally hill where Dale has his studio.
Nice,
that street
hill,
and all those side streets. So we're walking and talking and planning and thinking about gear and workflows and really kind of like a little dual session where we're like, what do you really want? Like, forget what you think you want, and what about the day job, and where are you really headed? What can I do? What can I do to help you get where you're headed? What can you do for me to help me get where I'm headed? How can we really lift each other up? How can you do? He wants to master records. I'm like, I'd like you to do in 3 or 4 years what took me 20 years to do.
Yeah.
I want that. If that's not an outcome, then we're kind of, I need you to build the systems, and then I want you to just completely with me and inherit them. Like whatever cool billing, workflow, Dropbox stuff we build, you just copy it, like copy paste, right? So we had this conversation, great, very productive, sort of overdue. And I come home and I come in and I'm in the kitchen, my wife's making food or whatever, and I'm talking. And after like 15 or 20 minutes, she's like, what do you think of the lights? And I'm like, what lights? And she's like, are you serious right now? Are you fucking with me? Like the Christmas lights. I was like, what? Oh, outside? Oh, there's Christmas lights? Oh. So I went back out and the house is like something out of a fucking movie.
It's like me with your wreath on
Yeah,
your door the other
right?
day.
The
I'm like,
wreath.
what wreath?
It is beautiful.
Clearly there.
But the real pièce de résistance was there was a string of lights from our house to a tree that you walk between the tree and the house. And the lights were draped low. The bulbs were like probably 4 inches long. And it basically almost touched my head. So I walked under a train of bright lights, new bright lights, not like brand new at night.
Because your
bright,
brain had made a prediction
shining
about
lights.
what it was going to see.
My brain wasn't there at all.
What do you mean?
My brain was in the meeting. Hear me out. There's a point here. My brain was in the meeting. I was fully still in the meeting. I was
So you were reverting to your memory about the environment. You navigated the environment from your memory, not from the moment, because you like you say, you were occupied with.
Maybe so. Yeah. So the mechanics.
That's fucked up, right?
It is fucked up. The point is, the work, the intensity of the work, the depth of the work made me unavailable to a beautifully Christmas lit house, carefully done by my wife. She was excited about my reaction when I came home, and I wasn't available to it. Now, I'm doing good work. There's a point in my work. I love the guy who will be assisting me. I want to see him thrive. He wants to see me thrive. Everything about it is healthy. I will feed my family better next year. It's all good stuff. But the unavailability to beauty and experience and life saddens me. And that is the mechanic. That's now that we're talking and thinking about it, that's what makes me sad, is the amount of noise in my life, work,
that's what I'm talking
work
about.
and noise, the stuff that you referred to earlier, that makes me unavailable to the beauty that may be coming out of the speakers in my studio or out of my children. I'm really good with the children generally, but like you miss stuff, or just anything, just the taste of a glass of wine, or I found a new hike near my house. You know, it's like the temptation to pull your phone out when it bings. It's like, okay, you've got to put it on silent before you walk, but like maybe you forget, and it's like leave it. Like, no, we're walking, we're hiking. You know, it's not. We're not looking at the phone. So that's what I'm feeling. But now that I've kind of said all that, you know, his enthusiasm for music was infectious, and it was hilarious because he talked about songs that I absolutely love. Joni Mitchell's Clouds.
The lyrics.
Both Sides Now, you know, these songs, like incredible songs, like some of the best songs ever written. But he talked about Careless Whisper by Michael Jackson. And I was like, oh, give me a fucking break, bro. But the passion, the way that it spoke to him, and it was really interesting to me. Anyone, it's worth listening to.
Yes.
First half hour from the opening beat. So yeah, that was...
He starts singing to us.
He sings them all, and in this really vulnerable out-of-tune voice, like beautiful. So that question...
Every song turned into the same key.
That's,
you know, it was just weird...
kind of drifted. Yeah.
I do him in G, bro.
He had a resonant frequency. Does anyone else, before we jump questions, does anyone else want to say anything about... from Jamie's question about the moment. None of us really actually spoke about the moment we fell in love, but that doesn't matter. Your perspective.
No,
careers.
we should though.
Okay, go for it.
Have a moment of falling in love. I mean,
I've talked about one of mine.
Hearing a Love
sure.
Supreme, John Coltrane, and realizing how emotive you can be with an instrument was a big moment for me. Because I had heard giant steps and these like fast up tempo things that like, oh wow, like saxophone acrobatics and you know, just scales. And then when I heard someone take a step back and be vulnerable in it, that was a crazy record. I mean, I just listened to that a couple of weekends ago for the first time in a long time.
I haven't heard it since college.
Yeah,
I used to rent it
played it in the
city
car
library.
in Cambria when I was on a little getaway. That was a highlight. That was a moment. And then learning how to play it was another one, right? So you kind of put the rubber to the road. After learning. And
that's next level.
And then drop out of school after you learn it and get a Pro Tools rig. And here we are. But I mean, that's that's the long story, extremely truncated.
Spider, do you want to say anything because you were enthusiastic about answering that question?
Yeah. I mean, I have two. You know, it sort of has happened in layers. There are definite milestones where my love has deepened and changed. I think the first one. So when I grew up, I had an upright piano in the house, and we had an organ in the house. I had inherited one as a 4-year-old from my great-grandmother. And, you know, those instruments were very interesting to me. And so I would sort of do things by ear. I mean, I was in church like 3 times a week, so there was just music all the time, right? Yeah. And then we didn't have radio in the house. Like, we weren't listening to popular music or rock music or anything like that. But if I ended up anywhere where I was exposed to, you know, the stuff that was on Top 40 radio or MTV or whatever, I would sort of figure it out by ear from memory, like little melodies. Like I remember the theme from, what was that movie? It's an Eddie Murphy movie. Axel F is the Harold Faltermeyer composition. Anyway, it's like a synthesizer.
Oh yeah,
right? Like crazy electro synth music. Figured that out on the organ or whatever, right? You know, that was sort of my relationship to the outside world. It was like some very distant thing that I could only access like in a dream or from a memory. You know, we didn't have TV in the house or anything like that. And so I would spend time in the church every week, every Monday, because my dad would like clean up the place and I would help him. And my mother was the secretary and the church organist and pianist. So I would be in an empty church sanctuary with this like 60s tube organ with like 100 tubes in it. And I would just voice it and, figure out what the different registers were doing and the pedals and shit. And then, figured out chords. And then I realized, like, if I held down this chord and then I just changed this bass note, my body would change.
Oh yeah.
You see what I mean? And then I could do a chord progression, but keep these notes up here and then just change the tonic under it.
Oh, dude, the pedal, man.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the depth of my experience and connection was to me, that was the truest, deepest thing I'd ever felt. Right? I'm like 7. And that was the first moment of love. It was like, you know what? I can trust this. It's like a deep well you find within yourself. And so I found that very empowering. And week after week, I had access to this big room. The piano, I would go back and forth. I would work out on the piano. I would fucking tell stories in my head, like avant-garde, whatever, banging on the fucking piano on the lid or whatever, using the keys. And then I would jump back to the organ and do more of this like voicing and the tremolo and the Leslie, and like, that was just magic to me. Week after week after week. And I think the next time, then I had like little sampling Casio SK1 my dad got at a toy store, and then eventually I met some kids in my neighborhood when I was about 12, and I joined their straight edge hardcore band, and I started playing bass in a straight edge hardcore band, and I got a guitar so I could actually write some of the songs, and then fucking Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit got played on Princeton radio, and it fucking blew the top of my head off. And I was like, at the same time, I want to quit writing rock songs and I want to do this for the rest of my life all at once. You know what I'm saying? It was one of those very bizarre, intense peak experiences. Again, tiny little speaker, hiding the fact that I'm listening to music up there in the attic. But yeah, those are two very distinct moments where it was deep, emotional, intimate, singular. I was alone, empowering, energizing, stimulating, inspiring. Yeah.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I'm glad you answered that question.
Yeah, and drawing on that, like that is what, when, in PMC marketing, this is a purpose that Michael and I outlined, is like to reconnect the people who make records with their moments like that, right? To sort of reinvigorate. That's why we use a lot of this sort of 90s nostalgic stuff, because it's like when that Nirvana record, I mean, a lot of our clients have a Smells Like Teen Spirit story.
That's the Beatles,
You know
Ed
what I
Sullivan
mean? That's
moment for our generation.
Yeah,
It
that
just
hits
is.
the center of the bullseye.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of like, it's just goodness. That feeling is just good. It's all good.
Go ahead.
I'm having a flashback because I don't have hardcore childhood memories like this, and I always wish I do, but I've just come to accept the fact that I just don't have that for some reason. And I just had a flashback to every jazz band performance that I ever did from middle school on through college, and I would be the first. I'd always want to solo first whenever it was time to take your 16 or just take, after the head, you would like, take as many bars. I would just get up there. Like, I was a shy kid too, but I just stood up. My face would get all red and I would just blow. That horn. And thinking about it now, I would play so many wrong notes, but it felt so good. And then my teacher, my jazz instructor would say, but it's jazz, there's no wrong notes. There were obvious wrong notes that I was playing. over chords I didn't understand yet because I was a child. But I'm just hearing what you're talking about, and I never felt embarrassed by it. I just had this real, true connection to that moment. And that hasn't really wavered yet. And I'm like realizing those moments, I'm not much different than I was in 6th grade or whenever I started 5th grade, started playing in jazz bands, and those freeing moments. And there's not very many things that one can do that really gives you that sense of flying, you know, and that, and you know, for someone that skydived, there's nothing real like soloing in front of an audience when you don't give a fuck about what you're playing because you don't know any better. It's different now. Like if I was up on got a gig with Ethio Cali playing soprano sax or something, foreshadowing.
Feels like you're flying. What a powerful image.
Yeah, it just, I mean, that's all I can see because just blinding lights. You don't know where you are. There's no audience. There's no stage when the middle school spotlights on you. It's all I can think about. Yeah, but it's just a crazy flashback to I don't think I had any inhibitions then. It was just like this. And now thinking about doing a snare note, you know, like, and trying to reflect on what you were saying about how it's not fun sometimes, or you feel sad or embarrassed to not have the love. It's like, how can we have the love when someone's asking you to turn the snare down? One, when you're in the mastering process, when you can't, you know, you don't even have access to the stem. And me, it's like, wait, did you hear the record? Did you hear what just happened to your record and how much more the vocal speaks now? Granted, I know you're narrow, you know, you're nearsighted right now, and we need to get the record across the line. So you're like, everything sounds great, just turn the snare down. And I get that, but you didn't say that. That wasn't the sentence. It's just like, can you turn the snare down? You know, how does that sound fun versus, yo, you made this record come, like Josh Murdy calling me today about this acoustic EP I just did for him and his artist Nico Moon. And they're just like full elation, like that childhood elation of, I can't believe our records can even sound like this. But I have notes, you know, like, but met with that. So that's when it's fun. So you're talking about times that are not fun. And a lot of the times it's not fun. It's not soloing. It's not having no inhibitions. There's a lot of people telling us what to do a lot of the time. And that's when it gets unfun.
That was my walk with Brian the other night. About this assisting work and figuring out this stuff and talking about what we can do for both of us to make those moments. He's struggled with it on the mix and recording side. I've struggled with it on the mastering side. And it's like, well, you know, that's this thing that I've said way more than once on mic here, which is if we're getting gigs that with music we don't love, it's on us. We're not communicating our values clearly enough. Yeah. Like, hey, I'm this guy. I love these records. I vibe on these kind of grooves, you know, whatever. And I think people are scared to say it, but I don't want to be a generalist. I don't want to make a production line mastering house. It's not what I'm interested in. I look at friends of ours who've done it and I'm proud of them and I'm happy for them and I'm grateful that they're in the world, but I don't want their gig. Yeah. I'm looking to do something that's a little slower and a little more gourmet and a little more artful. And maybe where we go a little deeper.
And open up that mental landscape so that you can see the Christmas lights.
Yeah, I think you
know what I mean?
I think, 2020 for me has been about meeting my artful self again that I lost when I was 21, that I just completely shut down, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that when you said feels like flying, immediately my whole body said conversation. That's what feels like flying to me.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I know, conversation. Oh, and it's like, wait, not records? It's like, no, conversation. Mm-hmm. You know, those sort of almost transcendent, giddy moments. I've had great shows too. But 2020 a lot of it is about sort of making friends again with that part of my life that I lost.
While Michael was answering the question, and I started by saying I had no goals. That's a lie. That's a straight up lie. My goals were to take more time off and say no more. And I did both of those things. And I mixed more songs than I did the year before. So how the fuck did that happen? I don't know, but I made a choice. And I definitely, the word gourmet really hits me.
They're not, mutually exclusive, again,
right.
It's like...
I have more songs this year that I'm proud of because I like the music more.
Yes, because you said no more.
Because I said no more.
And you're benefiting now from previous work.
Sure.
Just to tag on that and mention something that refers to an earlier question, then I've got one for Michael. If you look at the goal that Spider and I set for this year, early in the year. When COVID hit, it was like, this is going to be rough. We all knew it was going to be rough. I remember we had barbecue the other night, Spider, and I remember sitting with you at Baby Blue when that text conversation was happening with someone that we know who had access to information that maybe other people didn't have.
Yes.
Who had high level intelligence, really, for lack of a better word.
Yep.
This person in our orbit, and who was like, this is serious. This is going places. Watch this space, And we had been kicking it around anyway and just, but the point is, we sort of had a sense that it was going to be a rough year and a sense that it would end sometime. This will end, and we need to come out of this better than we went in. I think we talked about that on the conversations at home, Zoom or whatever we had
probably
that night, that Google Meet, and we've done it. We're better. We're stronger at the end of this year than we were in March. No question in my mind.
Yeah,
we're clearer. We're having more fun. We're making more money. We're more in touch with our better selves.
Better networked.
But like by every metric, the thing that we set out to do, the thing that we committed to, we've achieved. Now, is there like, we've made it to the top of this peak that we thought was that was the hilltop, and it's like, oh, there's now we can see the next summit. So we have a lot to do, but it's worth taking a moment to reflect and say, hey, we had some goals and we've done okay.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
Yeah,
it's really important to acknowledge.
It's hard this year to acknowledge those things. There's really no time markers. There's really no, it's very little celebration this year.
There's no break in the suffering that is sort of surrounds us ambiently.
Yeah.
So there's no like real time set aside to
it
acknowledge.
Feels it can feel off to celebrate or be grateful.
Yeah, tone deaf,
whatever.
Deaf, yeah. But we need it. I mean, collectively, we need to collectively celebrate things. I mean, to maintain, the social order. I mean, levels of optimism are partly maintained.
It's a resource
through collective appreciation and celebration. This is important.
So, when Michael gathered the questions earlier from the DMs, the conversation DMs, and I screenshot them and put them all on my photo so I could scan tonight. And this one was like, "Hello, Michael." It was an immediate Michael question. So let me see if you can guess which one it is. Michael's question to the conversations community: anything that's been on your mind that you'd like us to maybe touch on? And the Edusahe, who is that?
Eduardo.
Well,
Eduardo, great.
Shout out,
Eduardo.
Yeah,
I didn't
Eduardo.
connect that was Eduardo.
Merry Christmas, Eduardo.
All right, man. Well, here we go. That's a great question. I think so far everything has been so good. There were things that were on my mind, but I never realized it until you guys talk about it. Lately, I'm just figuring out how to deal with failure or not to achieve the best result on the first attempts. But I'm realizing that comes along with mastering the craft or profession, but definitely makes doubt of myself and my skills. So
I gotta
negotiating failure. Can I hit Michael with it first?
Oh,
or
sure,
have
sure,
you got,
sure,
you got
sure.
something?
This is someone alone in the world, not working under anyone. This is a young, independent mix engineer.
I just want to say something really quick because I don't have any deep comment here.
Yeah.
Just today, my first pass wasn't right. They said it wasn't right. They sent me another demo that they were like, we like this vibe. My first pass was objectively better. It was completely wrong because they, in parentheses, are calling this the song title demo version for a deluxe. The actual single is going to come out next year, right? This is the demo, the bedroom thing. And I made it sound so slick. She sounded so tight, all airy. In the demo they sent, she sounds like this, up against the mic, singing not like this because I don't know who sounds like this. But, I made it sound too good. It was a fail. It sounded great. I know what I'm doing. It's a big fail. Version 2, okay, you went too far. Version 3, we're really happy with this. If I just said the first attempt was like the one and I failed, they don't like it, like that's not the way that professionals should move through the world, I guess. It just seems like this happens all the time. And, he doesn't know me personally, but we talk in the DM, and I just want to say directly to him, that's going to happen all the time. It's never going to stop. So don't let it stop you now. That's all. That's all I wanted to say. Mm-hmm. Now Michael can go talk.
Yeah, that.
What he said.
I was talking to my buddy today, and I just knew he was low. So he usually attends art club, and he hasn't for the last 2 sessions. And then I was in New York, and I was like, hey, do you want to meet for dinner? And then he bailed, and I'm like, something's going on. Like, we didn't have a falling out, but I know something's going on. Mm-hmm. And I know him for a very long time, so I know his opting for isolation when things are going wrong. And that's why I reached out today, because the feeling was so strong for me. I was like, oh man, I got to see what's going on with him. And then immediately he was like, can you chat? And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm going for a walk, like 2 hours, let's talk. And so we talked about this. And like I mentioned earlier, he had just gotten laid off from his job, and he wasn't obviously proud of that and not really ready to face it in a group setting or one-on-one. He's mentioned that so many things that I've said have really helped him, and we have this relationship where we're peers, but he definitely does and has mentioned that he looks up to a lot of what I've done and my accomplishments and stuff. So he was even more ashamed of kind of admitting that this quote unquote failure had happened. And I mean, when we really got down to it, it was like so much of this quote unquote failure had to do with his framing of it, how he was feeling about it. Some of it was like, it was even him realizing the parts that he played in why this didn't work out, and I think those moments of the conversation today were the most powerful and the most useful, where it was like, well, what can we do about the situation? Like, maybe you can get this job back if you even want it. Doesn't even seem like you do. There's so many more things that you're excited about. And, really identifying that the failure has so much to do, or this idea of failure has so much to do with how you're viewing it, and so much to do with what's happening internally, that it's like, a lot of times we want to blame a client or some feedback or something, and then say like, it's on them, when like, how you're viewing it, you're choosing to view it as a failure or not. I mean, failure is a really powerful word, and it's a really defeating word. And it, if you're not, filling yourself with other words that are the complete opposite of that often, and you can fall into this trap of like, is everything I'm doing just a failure if I'm not getting these mega peak experiences? So it's a risky way of thinking, but it's important to recognize that it is internal, and a lot of the time, obviously, there are times where it's only external or a mix of both. But yeah, I think it's important to just think about your relationship with the word failure, how often you're using it, when you're using it, what it actually means to you. I think, we often debate each other or debate the words that are being used because of that. It's dangerous to insert words like that into the vocabulary, especially over like you said, getting a note. Is getting a note failure? Like, if it is, like, what else is failure? And that's where it can get really, really bad really quick.
I want to jump in defense of the word failure, because one strategy for sort of dealing with what is an obstacle is to sort of reframe it. So there's a failure in a technical sense where you don't achieve the goal, right? And so one can view failure as failure in and of itself. The term failure to me is benign, but if you sort of complete the sentence or dig a little deeper, you'll realize that the connotation is sort of part of your own internal narrative. So if you're just looking at failure as a failure in a system, failure in just the technicality of having not achieved what you set out to do, you can appreciate the fact that you recognizing the failure, that means you're already on step 2, right? You're already in the process of being better at what you're trying to be at, because now you are consciously incompetent. Before you were unconsciously incompetent, now you're consciously competent.
We've got a feedback loop happening.
Yeah.
In a good way.
You can actually recognize failure, and that's an achievement, right, in and of itself. So failure can be, one, how you know where you're at, right? So it's valuable feedback. And then you can evaluate that failure. You can pinpoint and isolate points of failure, fix them. The ability to do all of that is the progress. So, I want to be careful not to assign sort of magical powers to words. Like failure it's not necessarily harmful word to use.
Well, yeah, it simply means lack of success. So and if you don't feel successful and you feel like a failure, there's a spectrum there.
And yeah, Michael's point was to think about your relationship to the word, not sort of a pitch against the word. I think
yeah.
I just want to draw that.
I
just want to draw that very clear line for anybody listening.
It's important. On Peter Attia last week, a couple of weeks ago, he had a guest, Kristen Neff.
Yeah, I didn't
PhD,
listen to that one.
The Power of Self-Compassion, and she, immediately it sounds kind of a little bit hippie and a little bit
hippie wooey dooey.
Yeah, a little bit. But this woman was incredibly interesting. She had an interesting story, but also she is doing scientific trials on the power of self-compassion. She's actually running experiments, double-blind and placebo trials on the power of self-compassion, and they've proven it. She has a self-compassion workbook, which I actually bought and just got it yesterday. So I haven't opened it yet, but I'm looking forward to working on it. But my wife had just recently finished a course which has been very, very useful for her and very productive. And a central theme of it was just this self-compassion, but really, rather than the kind of watery, hippie-sounding self-compassion thing of just the disrupting this negative self-talk, disrupting these things that we say to ourselves when we fail or when we make mistakes or when we feel uncomfortable with an outcome. And you start berating yourself in a way that we would never do to each other. Things I would never say to another human, I'll say to myself all day.
Like when you tell me the salmon's okay, and I'm like, dude, it sucks because I made it.
You went 14 rounds at the table before we even cleared the dishes.
Yeah,
and
that's the tip of the iceberg of how demanding I am of myself.
I know it's crazy. And I joke about it here, but yeah, nobody gets ahead of me with beating myself up. It's like, you just do it all in advance just in case. There's no part of me unbruised. So you can't hurt me. I already did this all day, all night.
Yeah.
All during the birthday party I did. I was beating myself up then too, So it's a very human thing, but I've seen the power of how much making some changes around it has helped my wife. And I'm very keen.
Do you think the influence of your children helps that?
Oh, yeah. The influence of my children just helps everything.
What course was it?
I don't know the name of her course, but I can get the details.
Was it Laurie Santos' course?
No, it was a pretty intense course around, the theme of it was sort of, again, a hippy-dippy sounding name, Awakened Motherhood. But it was about connecting to, it was for moms who are struggling with aspects of parenting, just different aspects of, everything,
nice. Specific to that, yeah.
Yeah, but actually the when, I inadvertently caught a bunch of the coursework because I would come home from the studio at 10 and the kids are a bit in bed, so my wife's doing the videos and the thing, so I sort of heard a lot of it. And it was a collection of, like we're trying to do, a collection of good ideas, not probably all that many new ideas, but good ideas, meditation and mindfulness and all this stuff is sort of drawn together and put into language, self-compassion, that those receptors that we often talk about for people, for where they were at. The leader of the course was meeting people where they were at with stuff they could use, in ways they could use it. And that's what we talk about with what we're doing with the podcast, is like, we're lucky enough, the four of us, to be
showered in good ideas.
Yeah.
by all these channels of influence.
Yes. And not only that, but I mean, we just get in rooms where where stuff we didn't know or think about is sort of shown to us, or, and we try and bring that back and make it useful, bring it back to the table.
Yeah.
So I can't remember where I started with that whole thread, but self-compassion.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll report back in the book, but I think if that is a phrase that kind of makes you puke in your mouth a little bit, like
it does,
like
for me.
some of the business phrases make me puke. Lean into it, maybe.
Not as much as the term affirmation.
Yeah,
Words of affirmation.
Sure.
Definitely not the same. Yeah.
Which are have an opposite effect when people.
What is Seth Godin's
use
quote? Reassurance is futile. Love.
That's powerful. Should we take?
That one hits home.
I don't know why I'm amming
when
while you're talking.
the Seth Godin hits.
Yeah.
Should we take one more question, guys, and call it a night? We've been on for about 2 hours, 2:10. So
yeah, let's keep going.
Does anyone else want to pick a question, Spider?
I know we only have one more before this year's over.
Let's go swipe left and see which one grabs you. Sorry, I'm off mic. I think we've done 2 or 3 of them.
This one you handed me is interesting, and I think it's
is a name on.
It's
not all
Ty.
That's what I'm looking at right now.
Ty?
Yeah, Tyler. Yeah.
Tyler. Do we know which Tyler?
Sir Tyler.
You know who that is, Michael?
Up in Portland.
Word.
Ty.
It's just Ty. Like Madonna. Like that's just it.
Is he PMC, dude?
I don't know if Ty's PMC yet.
Well, anyway, he's emphatic about this concept of faith, faith in oneself,
I like
in
this.
others, in humanity. Right? Been thinking a lot and having lots of back and forth about what external factors affect what I believe and what I can do to strengthen my faith in myself and in those around me. Fuck. I mean, I think that the faith is probably not the word.
Yeah.
It's not belief without evidence. We're actually talking about belief in oneself. Sorry, I didn't mean to close it. It's belief. It's rational to believe in oneself. You don't have to take it on faith. There's evidence in humanity and goodness in the world. You don't. It's not irrational.
Well, what if you're? What if you're an alcoholic who has fallen off the wagon 4 times and you're on your knees at your lowest point? You've lost your marriage. It's whatever. Sketch the worst case scenario. Is it rational to believe in yourself then?
Yeah,
it is. Why?
Because so many people overcome, and that person will have already overcome other things.
I could believe in them, but what about me? What about me, the person who was on his knees right then? I'm obviously trying to.
Those are trying times.
But I suppose at that moment, do you need faith?
No, you need help.
Yes, yeah, that's
you
true.
Know what I'm
I
saying?
mean, yeah.
But help can only take you so far.
I'm trying to explore this line between faith and belief.
I'm with you.
It's interesting to me.
I'm with you.
Well, faith is belief with no evidence. That's what you said earlier, and that's a pretty clear line, right?
Yeah, I get Rory's point. There's a lot of evidence against. So if you're sort of belief against the evidence is sort of what you're getting at. Is like, what if the evidence is stacked against you personally?
Like if no one has liked your first 10 mixes, if should you do an 11th? If no one has liked your first 100th mixes, if you're on Rev 12 for every mix you've gotten across the line for your first 10 clients, should you quit? The evidence is saying this is fucking slow, tortuous. No one really digs it. Even at the end, they're kind of like, okay, we kind of did it. should you, so I'm kind of interested in this line, but I don't want to bog you down. You were headed on a point.
Well, again, I mean, I think a situation like that is I don't think this is bogging me down or getting me off the point. It's really about this framing of faith versus belief.
Yes.
And so I think it's important to pull that apart a little bit because, you're right. There are challenging situations, but look, this is what therapists are trained in, right? They reframe, they're going to take your story that you're telling about how desperate and how bleak your situation is and sort of zoom out and look at the time scale, from an aerial view and sort of shine the flashlight on what you do have going for you and this and that. So look, you can't, when you are in that situation, by definition, you are unable to see those things, right? That is the condition you're in. That is the condition we're describing. So, again, this is where only through feedback can you see the whole landscape, because you need everybody else's flashlight too, right?
Yeah.
You can't just see it. You can't see all the landscape with your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it may not appear rational for you to believe in yourself, but in fact, there is a lot of evidence in your favor. You just aren't seeing it at that time. You see what I mean?
I do.
And so it's a collective assessment rather than a solely self-assessment. What else did he write
Just
here?
for the record, though,
Do you have it
I made
up?
a mistake because I didn't see the picture right. This is Itai Lerner. Ty is a nickname. That's his Instagram. His name is Itai.
Oh,
so
word.
Just give Itai some credit.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
And some
Cool.
shout. As I said the wrong thing, I thought it was someone named Tyler that I've also similar photo.
Great. I'm still drawn to the extreme cases of people who didn't get the support they needed. I'm thinking about people who aren't surrounded with maybe loving parents or a friend group that's bigging them up. Maybe they've got people they run with who are insecure and hurt and damaged, and they're not elevating them. I'm thinking of how lucky we are. To have come up in a house where someone said that's a great painting.
Yeah.
And put it on the fridge. And I mean, I'm conscious that we're sending this out there, and it's going to land on people's ears who didn't have that.
Well, I had I hope this isn't too personal for Josh, but my assistant's parents came to town for the first time, and I met them for the first time, and Dad was extremely appreciative of giving him a job and an opportunity, and he was he's a Vietnam vet and just really quiet and to himself and just really kind and thankful. And Mom, though sweet and wonderful, kept saying that he needs a plan B, that he still needs a backup plan. I was like, do you see where he's working right now and who he's working with and the people the support that he has around him? Like, your son's, I just said,
He's
your boy,
holding so much of this up.
yeah. I said, your boy's going to be okay. I got you. No plan B. Well, he was so good at piano and he quit piano to engineer. And it's like, he's going to be more successful as an engineer. I can promise you this. Like, I'm like looking at this woman in the face, just promising her that, but because we're lucky, because he's lucky, because he has an apprenticeship. So I understand what you're saying. I'm just trying to paint that in my real life. And I came from a deep mentorship and so is he, and he's going to be okay. And you're talking about the people that might never have that opportunity. And the first thing that comes to mind to me is just asking yourself, do you like what you're doing? Like, do you put this record or this photo or this brochure? Do people make brochures? Wrong word. That's
Dentist.
I don't really drink red
this
wine.
vellum
so-
scroll
Highlight magazines.
with wax seal.
So, but anything that you make or design or paint, does it speak to you when you present it in other places, right? So like
I'm shaking my head here.
why?
Yeah, because a lot of what I do doesn't, and that's the project for 2021.
Yeah. So there's a test here, right? You do it for yourself, whether you like it or not is irrelevant. To a degree, you do it with your homies around, someone that you trust, and you gauge a reaction, right? These are levels to test how people and how you respond when other people are in the room viewing or listening to what you're creating. And there's a different response that you'll get. Mm-hmm. You might love something and then play it in the room and realize that no one reacted the way you expected or thought they could. So you realize all the bad things about it that you didn't do based on something that they didn't even say. They might not even have thought the snare was wrong, but you're like, oh, the snare's not right? But could be the opposite too. You could hate everything that you did, and then there's one thing that's said, like pinpointing to one place of it's like when I mix a song I don't like, but I can find love in a drum sound or a synth sound or a keyboard or anything. I'm finding that it's reshaping my whole perspective on what I'm working on or what I'm listening to. So we constantly have to get feedback from somewhere. That's why SoundCloud was so dope recently. Like, you just put up a song and get 53 people to listen to it, or 53 million people to listen to it. 53 people is still 53 perspectives that can alter yours to gauge where you're at and grow from it. So I don't know, in today's internet world and the world that's going to be in the future, there's a lot of ways to reinstill faith, if we're going to use that word, in oneself and belief in oneself. I don't know. I think you have to look outward to get that. And
there's a lot of potential sources. I mean, I'm being a little bit glib, but there's a lot of potential sources of, you put up your video and the 9 first YouTube comments are kill yourself. It's like,
sorry, it's like
online. It is kind of funny because it's just like so gnarly out there online. I'm thinking of younger.
Look, that's not, that outlandish criticism and hatred is not what I'm talking about.
Of course not.
That needs to be filtered out.
Yeah, it's not valuable feedback.
No, but
Itai is also, he's saying that he's been thinking a lot, sort of having an internal debate about the external factors that are affecting what he believes, what his beliefs are. And that is a serious problem. I mean, if immediately I just think if one is watching the news whilst spending a lot of time watching the news while trying to improve their outlook on humanity might be an extra challenge. The news might be presenting an extra challenge because it's shining a flashlight on a very narrow part of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So, I think when we're trying to move in the world in an optimistic way, a strategy for increasing opportunity for the things you want, the things that are good. Optimism is a strategy. If you're trying to move through the world with optimism and there are influences in your life that are making unnecessarily less optimistic, I would consider, limiting the ability of those sources to do that somehow.
Yeah, that's good.
I think his phrasing leaves room for, on Mike.
It does. It
leaves room for what Mike or for what Jon said too. Been thinking a lot and having lots of back and forth about what external factors affect what I believe and what I can do to strengthen my faith in myself and those around me. So it could be positive or negative. Mm-hmm. It has no valence. So
right.
I think it's all of the things we talk about. It's the cohort. It's the value of feedback.
I'm hearing that specific. Knowing him.
Okay.
To a small degree, we spent a few hangs together. I imagine someone is the external feedback is that it doesn't sound like other things that these people are expecting things to sound, because he's trying to forge.
So this is a professional question.
Yeah, I think he's trying to forge his own path as an engineer. I think he respects the art of engineering, from what I gather. His questions tend to be, the questions that I would like understand where they're coming from and want to answer, if that makes sense. Like how I'd want to affect a mentee of some sort, an apprentice, and that's the struggle. Is like, okay, well, you're not getting validated in what you're doing, maybe, and how do you let that not affect the next thing you create? Or do you even finish the thing that you didn't get a reaction for? Maybe that just means it wasn't finished. It could mean so many possibilities. I think that's where it's coming from, is what I'm gathering from the phrasing and the language and the convolutedness of it all.
Yeah, I don't think
and you have a context.
And you're right. I don't think it's something you can do on your own.
Yeah, I don't think it's something you do on your own.
You need cohort. You need...
You've articulated
Dude,
that.
I
really
thought about
well.
this in the car on the way here because I read this question now that I'm remembering on the way after I realized that I had a tire running flat. I stopped thinking about this, but I briefly touched on Spider in my head. Spider and Tony acknowledging something good about what I played them that I thought was utter shit. Like, I thought the songs were good, because it was the best pop music that I had worked on coming from kind of emo hardcore land. But I didn't think I did a good job. I was like all over the place learning how to program drums because I was an organic music creator, and I got triplets going everywhere and these odd polyrhythms and doing weird shit because that's the music I came up playing, jazz. And it was a pop song with hi-hats and like 20 shakers. There's so much percussion. I haven't listened to these songs forever. That's my version because the artist is one of my best friends, sent me a version. Was like, yo, man, like, check this out. We did this 8 years ago, and it's still pretty tight. And I was like, the song's actually pretty good. The melody's really tight. But whoa, what's with that drum programming? But Spider and Tony gave me a shot because they heard potential in maybe a sonic delivery and cohesion. And
I think we heard success and some accomplishments in there.
Sure, you can speak on that, but that's not what I felt.
Not purely potential. You'd achieved things. You'd achieved certain things.
What? That they were finished?
Dynamics, like just the emotional sort of. There was some success in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm completely unaware of that.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of how one actually realizes that they're good at something. Like, I now know John 3.5 is coming right around the corner. Almost 35. I know I'm good. For the first time for the last year or two. And I only know I'm good, and this is a weird thing to say about yourself, is because people keep hiring me. So I must
Enough
be.
people told me.
Enough people told me.
So
if
might
I'm
as
just
well
being
believe them.
vulnerable and real, to a question like that, I just started realizing that the feedback that I was getting was good just recently. And I've been doing this for 17 years. Like Michael was talking about how long he's been designing. I think I'm going to get better, and I think that there's so much growth to have. I think I just stumbled upon a couple of things that are working for me that I'm going to get even better on because I know what they are, and I'm going to push them even further, and I'm still practicing every day. But I'm still going to gauge feedback to see if those new things are connecting, right? So that hasn't changed. And I thought to myself in the car ride that that's what got me a look. And that's what got me an early chance, or it wasn't really early. It was 10 years in, but it felt early because the development that's come since then in another 10 years. But I just thought that because someone asked, it was Itai and then someone else's conversation or question about how people got their first successes. And it's just like, what does it look like for an engineer starting out as a recording engineer? Can you start as a mixer? Like I wanted to answer that question on a technical sense because I don't think you can mix if you've never recorded. So there's no way to start as a mix engineer. I think you have to understand the source. You have to understand signal flow from the beginning before you can mix a record. You can push faders around and EQ and think something sounds right, but if you don't really know the fundamentals of the possibilities of capture, I don't know if you can call yourself a mix engineer. I don't know. This is something probably up for debate that we can go deeper on. But I wanted to touch on that. And kind of simultaneously with you do need to get a look, and the minute you get a look, the newest Knowledge Project episode that I was just talking about was with, I think he's like the co-founder of Pinterest, Shalil something, someone's gonna correct me on that, and he talks about how gaining any sort of accolade or success just gives you some sort of social currency. Like people start taking you more seriously. And it's not until you have that, this is kind of a sad truth, that, and people don't really admit or talk about this, but it's not until I had a hit song that people booked me 300 plus songs in a year. I don't know. I think I was good up until a degree, but it's not until I had that look where they can bank on someone like me. They can put trust in me and know that they're going to get something that could work because they've heard something I did work. And it's a shame that that's the case, but there's always going to be someone that wants to give you the chance, a young A&R that brings you in on a new project and it gets the look, and then someone or an indie artist that you work with on the side and you've done a whole project with, and then they break through and, you know, some blog pushes them and it gets success, and then you're along for the ride. There's so many versions of it that can happen, but there really needs to be a look, and I don't think people admit that and they don't want to believe it. But to Itai, I think that's something that is going to put him in the lane that he wants to be in, and just has to be patient until that hits. And it will. You're 24, dude, maybe 23.
Yeah,
I don't
nice.
He's got some time.
Yeah, he's got some time, and he asked the right questions.
Asking the right
You know,
questions.
he doesn't have good monitors though, so we should talk.
Well,
We
that's,
can hook him up. I was
Rory, if you don't mind, because there was a great segue in there
do it.
to Nathan Phillips. Part of Nathan Phillips' question is about, he said he'd be interested to hear us, our perspective on growing a sonic brand.
Oh yeah.
Just that piece. And, you know, when it's the right time to go freelance or whatever and do your own mix
Yes, this
business.
is what I was.
But
yes,
he's working under he's working with Geoff Ellis. He's a Geoff Ellis assistant. But the part of this that I'm getting that I think will help Itai as well is this sonic brand piece. Because I think we all have a lot of thoughts about this, about identity, like your work having identity, sort of speaking for you in some way, being sort of honest and sort of aligning what your natural preferences and pleasure with your work, so that you are you therefore sort of eliminating competition because you are, emotionally motivated in your sleep when you have a headache, this sort of just got off a plane, hungover, jet lag, and you can still do the thing. It's the, when you do have that alignment, you won't have as much competition. I'm sure you guys have.
Well, then the people that
to say about
are
this.
bringing you into the picture and hiring you are going to be rooting for you the whole way. They're not anticipating failure. They're anticipating success. So they're going to help you get there. Like this first pass to third pass today, this afternoon, the producer wants me to get it over the line as fast as possible and as enjoyable as possible. We know each other. We like each other. This is the case, but it's because of what you just said that now is the case most of the time. People want you to win if they're hiring you to do something. It's when you get into the like mix offs or whatever those things are, which is for another time. Just that's a different context. There's weird competition in there that I don't think they want. They just want something that works, and they're giving it to 4 people, and that's something we can dissect another time. But most of the time, people want you to win. So I learned that fairly recently, and I come into it that way. It's like I'm sending something knowing that they want it to work for them. So the more we can align on a sonic identity, or a brand for that matter, the chances of that intersecting and moving forward together is way higher, a higher percentile. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
what we all really want. We can't be the master house,
There's a kind of a simplicity to that. What about the more general question, Michael, of when to, as someone who quit day gigs and went freelance, that I'm thinking of the broader audience of creatives that we speak to,
I definitely want to be careful in that I don't understand the full dynamics of the system that is the music industry and how audio engineers factor into that.
Like we do.
Obviously. And I think it's a very complex map that I actually am very interested in exploring and understanding as a side note. But I mean, I was saying to my buddy today, we had an amazing convo. I wish it was recorded, to be honest. Like, there was a moment where I said, I think every designer needs to run a business because you learn to appreciate every single element that a big business has silos of. Like, they have silos of designers and marketers and this and that. But when you are the designer and the marketer and the advertising and the salesperson and the
Customer
and
support.
the technician
Yeah.
and the operations person
Taxes.
and the CEO,
Yeah.
A lot.
and then you really understand it and appreciate it. So I think it's the same for any engineer. Like if you're working under someone or you're working at a big studio or something, and you might be taking a lot for granted, and you might not even know how you could contribute to make that experience even better if you don't fully understand what it actually looks like when you're trying to. I mean, I always hear this quote. It's sort of like this tech thing, but it's like, try to make $1 online. Like, just try, make $1 from someone you don't know, because there's a lot that goes into that dollar. You know what I mean? It doesn't just appear. You need to really figure out certain things, and $1 is going to be easier than $1 million, but there are a lot of processes and things you have to set up. So I think even just saying, and I think I have this thing against the word freelancer. I feel like that's just like, I'm a business owner who doesn't take it fully seriously. That's how I kind of see that word being used often. That's my definition of it. But I like to say that I run a business because, I mean, it's actually a business legally, but also I want to consider it a business. I want it to be a business that is as accountable as all the other businesses in the world. And a freelancer is like, yeah, I could like just get another gig at some point, or this is temporary, or this, it just feels like, I'm like driving for Uber today, but then I might do Lyft tomorrow. Like it's sort of just, that kind of thing.
That's different.
And
if you're designing the page structure for Vogue magazine and jumping to Playboy and then jumping to a sneaker company versus like driving for Uber and Lyft, like you could be a freelance designer and be art directing for some of the biggest brands in the world, and you're freelance and you don't have you're just your name and you don't actually have a DBA necessarily. I mean, besides on a bank account. I just want, I don't know. That's something to push back on, because
I'm not talking about
they are
the
running a
technical,
business.
I'm talking about the philosophical. So I'm talking about people using the term freelancer when they are just in between things.
Yeah.
That's the only circumstance I'm referring to here. Now, yes, you can legally be a freelancer and use that title in a positive way, like most words, but I see it as that way. I'm just saying it's a caution. I'm cautioning around the use of the word because I've seen it in both cases, but I've seen it in that case of like, yeah, that's sort of the thing that I'm going to do in between. I know, definitely people have done. Seth Godin is sort of the best example of that. He talks about being a freelancer in the highest degree, in the highest level of what that means. So all that to say is, even as a freelancer, making $1, selling that first mix, doing that is going to teach you so much. So doing that now versus doing that in 2 years from now or 10 years from now, or when people think they're ready, which is like sometimes never, or sometimes like, that's so internal. Like when you decide that, like it's better to try it sooner and not give up. Like just try it, like as literally an experiment. Can I sell a mix of my own? Because I think people would be surprised, and it will teach you a lot. And it might teach you that, yeah, maybe right now, like my business acumen's not up, or this is just too complex for me right now, or I need help with this and I don't have it, or I need help in this area and maybe I should work for someone to get it. I think it will just level up your appreciation for what it actually means to run a business, what it means to be a part of a team, what your function is when you're on a team. Like if you're responsible for the accounting, for a business, like, maybe you're an assistant, you're doing all of the invoicing, and then you're doing some, assisting on the side, right? Like, how much pride do you put into that work? How important do you really see that work? It's hard to do when it's like, I'm doing it for this other guy, like, and they're paying me and it's cool, but it's like, it's just the thing I'm getting out of the way. But maybe that, when it's your own, I know for me, when I'm in Wave, which is the app I use for accounting, it's like, I was in it today. I was taking so much pride in like, what are the products listed? How are they listed? How are they formatted? Like all these nuances that you can really get into and see, and you really see the depth of a business and the breadth that a business actually has. So my response is like, try it now, try it later. You know, if it's something that's interesting to you, like you don't need to hold back. You could literally do both. Just try to get a gig. If you have a gig right now, try to get like one mix and just see everything that went into that. And if you like it, keep going.
Yo, my rate's $1.
Get me $1 mixes.
Yeah,
No,
and then
for
you
real.
can,
How many spec
Yeah.
mixes do you have to do before someone will pay you $1?
you can graduate to Fiverr. That's
That's
Yeah.
not the situation Nathan's in.
no.
But you know, I think the making the jump to your own business or, you know, freelance status or whatever, I think comes after this part of the question about the sonic brand. And mostly when we think about people who have a sound, like Paul McCartney had a bass sound, you know, like, I don't know, you could say maybe Chad Blake has a sound as an engineer. Does he have a sound?
You had. Yeah. He certainly had.
Right. But, you know, it's I don't love that idea of an engineer having a sound.
Definitely not.
I like the idea of an engineer having an identity,
Having taste.
taste, and a sort of identity, something recognizable about their work, which usually has to do with the artists they attract, and the producers they attract and partner with. But the part, you know, I'm always reminded, you know, this sort of turn I made in my mind when Michael explained to me the brand is not generated by the company, it's generated by the audience or the customers. It's how an entity is understood in the world. And so it's not like you get a song and you stamp it with your brand as an engineer and that's your brand.
That sounds horrifying.
That's not it. It's how you're thought of.
Yeah.
It's how you're understood. It's how you're known.
What people say about you.
Yeah. So a sonic brand as an audio engineer, to me, like this is very important. It's really, it precedes the ability to go freelance, right? You want a reputation
And
that fits you out in the world. You know, that's what you're building. He's saying, how do you build a sonic brand?
yeah.
Right? How do you build that reputation in the world? And I think it has a lot to do with the artists
Yeah.
and not so much about your processing.
Very
Yeah.
much.
I'm definitely not about your processing.
Yeah.
I'm interested. Well, I have two things to say, and then I think we should maybe think about closing it out. But I'm interested in how 2.5 hours. No, keep going.
45, 245.
Yeah, 2:45.
No, we
I'm
started at
interested
7:15,
in just how often, you know, we often talk about these elder producer, mixers, engineers, and they're sort of the stories that they tell on these interviews, these Mix with the Masters, whatever, Pensado's Place, all of the things. And quite often a repeating trope is this idea that, you know, you just got to get in the trenches and suck it up for 25 years doing records you hate, and then you'll get your break. You know, like
Pay your dues, bro.
yeah, pay your dues, right? And when I think about using this sonic brand phrase in this sort of generalized way that we've explored, and I think about, have you got a better chance of keeping the Starbucks gig and doing one record a week, one mix a week, one recording session a week with an artist who really resonates for you, a friend or a you know, someone you saw at a club or whatever, someone at your level, a young artist, say you're young, you're coming up, or getting in the trenches and working on a bunch of shit that you don't like. I mean, you know, as an assistant to,
I'm so with this.
you know, and quite often, I think at very least that should be an open question and not predetermined, that doing more of something gives you a better chance.
More of something
Now-
you don't like.
Well, yes, exactly. And when you know, there was merit in the old system of like, we're recording real instruments in real rooms with mics, and the more reps, there's something to that. But in the modern paradigm and in the modern branding landscape, I think it at very least, it's got to be a question of which strategy is better. And we should come up with names for these two strategies, right?
That's what I mean. The work, the identity isn't between the engineer and the computer. It's the art. It's the engineer between the artist and the audience.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, no, completely. And then maybe to tie off that and Michael's point and link it to, I think was the first question, is when you talk about, what you're optimizing your business for, whatever your business is, if your business is one mix a month and you do work at Starbucks, or you work at Starbucks and your dad's tire shop, and you get to do one mix a month, or, we know everyone on this scale, all of the, from 0 to 10, people who get to mix in their living room with wives and children, to people in A rooms in town, right? So you think about your business, and the question that your comments brought to mind, Michael, on your freelancing riff was, what are you optimizing for? Like, are you building a business? Like, if you said to me tomorrow, 2 choices, the road forks, A or B, this is it, just a binary choice. You can have a business that turns over 2 million a year mastering records. And I have friends who've done 2 million. One dude built 2 million mastering, right? You can turn over 2 million a year doing records, just doing whatever comes through the door, generalist, or 1 million in a year, but you get to pick the work. For some people, the answer is the first one, absolutely, because their goal is to retire, or buy a yacht, or have a Porsche, or a house, right? For me, it's clearly the second option. It's B every time, because I think about what I have, and I think about my legacy, and I think about all of this stuff, and all I have is right now. I have this moment, and I have the tired ass that I bring through the door to my kids. So the idea that I could come through the door energized by having worked on an Ethan Gruska record, instead of depleted by having worked on a trap record that I hate.
Did you?
No, Christ, no. I would love it. It'll come. But I just keep saying it. So to me, that's a clear choice. But it's not for everyone. And when Michael was saying it, and then the last point is: are those two, like, is it mutually exclusive? Couldn't you just say, well, I just want to make 2 million and work on the records I love? I'm obviously using very broad numbers, and but the idea that, does it have to be a trade-off? And they're interesting questions to me. But again, maybe questions that aren't being asked very often is like, what are you optimizing for here in your business?
Yeah.
Is it volume? Is it throughput? Is it like, I know people who make one record a year, and they spend a whole year making the record, and other people who are just like, production line at the highest level, and good work. I'm not being dismissive of that. Like, they're moving product through the system fast, and they're optimized for that. It's worth asking,
which one?
as a creative, what are you interested in doing?
Well, that's the primary aim. So for someone like Nathan, thinking about his professional identity sonically.
Nathan, the question asker.
Yes. Nathan Phillips. I think that's the, how you trying to live. What do you want your days to be like?
Yeah.
It's primary aim stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
This was great, guys.
Let's call it on that.
Yeah. Michael, you got anything before we close? It's 3 hours. We've said everything. We used all the words. Do you know what's really interesting? When Spider and I...
Siri says it's time to stand.
Well, okay, stand for something. We stand for lots of things. What's interesting is when Spider and I do the questions at the end of the week, we listen to the episodes we're about to drop, and we spend some time individually and then together refining questions. But I find myself searching the transcript for words, because I'm looking for questions in our conversations. So I look for words like would, could, but it's funny how many times we use some words.
Yeah.
And that's all I'll say. We'll come back to it. It made me laugh out loud when I did like a search on some goofy word. It was like, wait, we said that 800 times? And it's like, how is that even possible?
Oh no.
But the question, there's a whole episode to be done on the question process, because it's becoming more and more intriguing to me.
Yes.
Nice.
We had some real punchy moments last week, and it was fun.
It's writing.
It's writing, yeah.
That might be a nice a year closeout episode, honestly, to talk about the questions and
Yeah.
I feel like, to me, that sounds like an awesome, like, behind the scenes sort of Instagram feature, IGTV sort of deal, like mini documentary sort of, like,
I should get a
'cause it's more
turtleneck.
behind the scennes content. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
you're,
definitely a
you're dead
turtleneck.
right. Yeah, that's great.
But it would be like valuable. It's a valuable augmentation to what we're doing.
It's
I don't
kind of
know, like the whole
It's kind of
episode.
like dream work.
Yeah, it's not an episode worth, but it's dream work. Yeah. Anyway, I think a theme for us in these conversations, we often instead, in an effort to avoid being prescriptive, we're saying maybe think about the question, think about primary aim, think about is it A or B, and linger. Let those questions sort of permeate,
Just work on it.
percolate. What happens to
Percolate?
questions in your mind? What do questions
Well, they can
do?
permeate your consciousness.
Yes.
They can percolate in your mind.
They can, let the questions
Let
do
them
whatever the
simmer.
question's going to do.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Peace, guys. Good night.
Yeah.
This was great.
Night.
Awesome, guys.
Cheers. Thanks, Tim.
Conversations is produced and mixed by Dylan Seals. The Conversations theme was performed and recorded by the Hazelrigg brothers.